No, we didn't.
I was just about to. I was imminently.
Go ahead. Go ahead, I can catch my breath.
All I was going to say is I call the meeting to order.
Right.
Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to go? Go ahead.
I can start with roll call if you'd like.
Why don't you do roll call? Perfect.
So Tanya Rash-Williams,
Yes?
Jill Ingle-Cox,
Here.
Samantha Cook, here. Tim Silverman,
Present.
Martha Curtis,
Here.
Todd Collins,
Here.
and Allison Schwab should be with us here in the next half hour.
Perfect. So approval of the agenda. So today we're going to have presentations on water conservation, recycling, and electric vehicles, and the usual update from staff and board. So anybody object to the agenda?
I just have a comment that's on the meetings from last time. I just would like to get a quick update on the solar garden RFP.
Yes,
If we could
It's
just
on.
add that to the end.
it's at the end.
Yeah, it's under the staff and board updates that they right bottom there.
Okay, very good.
But yeah, let's make sure we leave time for that. Any comments or changes to the minutes from last time?
Move to approve.
I have one correction, if we may.
Please.
My last name is spelled differently. It's Gerdes and not Curtis. It's Gerdes instead of Curtis.
Oh, apologies. I
Never-
got you.
Very common.
And on mine, the E was dropped.
Is it correct in the roster?
Yes, I saw that on the next one. Thank you so much.
On the
Did
line?
you send out by email?
Yes.
All right, in any other changes beyond the name change corrections? All right, a second to the motion to approve?
A second.
Okay. Any objections? All right, did we have any public comments? I told my husband he should show up and make a comment, but, all right. We'll go to the first presentation, and then after that, I will turn it back over to the chair. So first presentation's on water conservation.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Brian Tracy. I is probably one of the newest employees with the City of Golden, so I've been here about 2 months. My background, just so you know who's up here and why I have the credibility or credentials to talk to you, are why issues. I have about probably 15 or 16 years of utility management experience. I worked as a water manager up in the Vale area for a number of years as a state certified water operator, distribution system operator up there, and eventually managed water systems for Vale and Avon. We went to South Platte New, which is essentially functions as a department of the city of Inglewood. So they serve 300,000 residents through their wastewater facility. I also, up in Vail, taught in the sustainability program at Colorado Mountain College, teaching in watershed science and land use to undergraduate students and ecology and sustainability. So if there are two of my favorite things are water and sustainability. So I couldn't imagine a better group to speak in front of. I feel like we're probably all on the same page with sustainability and water stuff. So I am backfilling Ann Byerly's role. She was promoted to the director, and so I am the deputy director of public works, overseeing the utility side of things, the water treatment plant, utility, water conservation and efficiency falls into that. And I'm here to talk about water efficiency and conservation, some of the proposed ordinances that we're considering, our efforts on drought triggers and resiliency. So if you have questions, just raise your hand, or even though I feel like I'm dressed formally, this could be an informal conversation. We have an hour plugged in. I don't have an hour worth of slides, but there's certainly a lot to talk about if we want to talk about it. And I think I introduced my colleague, Katie Schwab. All right. A little background on water efficiency and conservation. So the Water Conservation Act in 1991 required utilities to have an efficiency plan. In 2004, the Colorado General Assembly required that utilities report conservation data to the Colorado Water Conservation Board. In 2007, the City of Golden asked the utility or residents to reduce water use by 15% over 15 years. In 2012, the same goal was asked, and then in 2019, we're on that same goal, reduce water use by 15% for 2030. It's a good goal. It's gallons per capita per day, per person, I think is the metric. And currently, we are tapped into the Front Range Drought Group, which is a consortium of all of the participating Front Range utilities from Northern Water, City of Fort Collins, Denver Water, you even have some West Slope entities in that. And that group gets together to talk about what measures they're doing, what ordinances they have, a little bit of supply issue, just basically collaborating on conservation stuff. We participate in, go ahead.
I was curious on those goals, the 15% over and over and over. How do we do?
Well, I will show that slide here in a minute.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we are also participating in the Colorado, well, in short, we met the goals. So spoiler alert there. We do participate in the Colorado Water Conservation Board Water Availability Task Force. So that's, again, a consortium of utilities around the state that talk about supply issues and the projections for filling reservoirs. It's essentially looking at drought conditions, soil moisture, anticipated runoff amounts, and things like that. We are following American Water Works Association standards for lost water, non-revenue water, and efficiency planning. We have a lot of council and sustainability board support. We have formal drought plans and formal efficiency plans in place. Some of the specific tools that we're leveraging at the City of Golden are the Aquahawk customer outreach that allows us to query high users, or any citizen of Golden can log in to the system and set up their account. They can set their own water budget. They can get their own alerts emailed to them. We have staff that will follow up and look at the top 10 users, top 50 users, and send those users a notification if we see something unusual in their account activity. And we have essentially like an hourly resolution on their water use. So if customers want follow-up, we can support them on that. A lot of times we can spot underground irrigation leaks that a customer may not be aware of if they're out of town and the toilet's running. It is that sensitive, so we can pick it up and follow up with an email. We utilize Resource Central for Garden in the Box, so that's essentially encouraging people to replace turf grass with xeriscape plants and flowers, perennials. Participate in EPA WaterSense. We offer smart irrigation rebates up to $100 for smart irrigation technology. Rain sensors up to $50 for a rain sensor on the irrigation system. We're doing a lot of data collection. We do a lot of outreach, as I talked about with the Aquahawk customer outreach, but we're increasing that education and outreach component. And we do have voluntary water restrictions, and I think as we go through what ideally the recommendation we would see is we want more enforcement mechanisms on those restrictions. When I came to Golden a couple months ago, I categorized the water conservation and efficiency planning as a shotgun approach, and so that's what this slide represents. It's all of the things that we want people to do, just out there on the screen. So what I'm trying to do is come in and work with the teams on a strategic plan that would look, we have a vision, we have an objective of 15% reduction that's been established by this board and city council, but also drilling into the SMART goals, developing categories for each type of use, which is where we're at right now in that plan. So you have folks like the golf course and City of Golden Parks that might be on, they might have a different savings objective. They're certainly going to have some drought triggers that play into city water availability drought triggers. But what we're looking at is what staff in the city should be focused on what effort, and what are the SMART goals for each of those categories. So if we're trying to reduce indoor use, is it a 15% reduction? Is that 15% reduction that we're tasked with appropriate for all categories of use? And could we achieve more? And just looking at who on the staff is going to execute some of these, who's going to report on the data, what are our success criteria? How do we determine if we're successful?
interestingly, right now, water efficiency and conservation is not one person's full-time job. It's a lot of people's part-time job, and so we're looking at how can we bolster that position in that program. Here is the graph showing our data. You can see the population in blue. It's a little small on here. You can see the total acre foot in gray. Acre foot per capita is the yellow line, and then the linear trend. You can see the downward projection there. So that's the data that we're working with right now. That's the data that shows up in the drought plan. Any questions on that?
So the 15% reduction goal was per capita or total?
Per person per capita, so it's not.
I actually think we should discuss that.
Okay, well, I'm just wanted to know what the goal,
Yeah,
what it was total.
and I think Tanya's right. It probably is something to discuss.
I think, yeah, I don't know actually if that's true.
It's a codified goal, so set by resolution by city council. So,
Based on per capita per day?
right, so if you want to change that, it would be a proposal of the city council with a different suggestion.
Which I think internally at the staff level, we're probably going to be recommending some performance metrics and goals for each of these categories. So you probably at some point have an opportunity.
You know, I think at this point in time, since the goal was established in 2019, based on 2018 baseline, I doubt, Brian, that we met already the 15% based on 2018 per capita. Did we meet that already?
That's a good point. I'll have to look at that. I don't have that at my fingertips.
The 15% was from what baseline? The original, the one that you showed before? No, the ones that he showed before.
Yeah, 2019.
As I understand it, it's been
Okay.
3 separate 15% metrics, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We always
It's not
change
like
the
it's so confusing.
baseline. Change the baseline.
Right, okay. So the 2019 metric was set in based off the 2018 water usage. Is that what
I have it as a 2019 metric. I'm not sure if it was referencing.
So,
I think it was supposed to be 50% savings starting 2019 from the previous savings period. So,
From the 2018 baseline, correct?
yeah, before
Yeah.
2018.
so Katie's right,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
The two times that the city council kind of approved the new goals, the first baseline was 2007, and then it reset in 19 for another 15% for the next goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not a single year baseline, it's the amount from it's like an average over a certain, okay.
It's the annual, my understanding was it's the annual average over 2018. And I don't even think, but correct me, Teresa, that we based it on the indoor consumption. I think we lumped together the indoor and outdoor consumption and said over the whole, if you take the whole year of an average per capita, 15% of that.
Right, so one of the difficulties is that when you think of per capita, people tend to think about like what an individual's water consumption is. In our metric, it lumps everything into
And
it.
it's
So
divided by
the
the
complete
population.
diversion, off of the creek, and so we're wrapping in commercial, industrial, all of that into that single metric. And there's a point in here as to whether or not that's the correct metric to use, but that's kind of what we're paying.
But that's, like, I'm looking at the fluctuation from, like say, 2014 and 2015, that number was quite low for, maybe it was a wet year.
Yeah.
And then we've actually increased, it's like, how are we measuring
Well, yeah.
actual reduction versus, climate, seasonal related differences?
Right. Good question. You'd have to overlay it with weather data and precipitation data. I don't have that metric
Yeah.
right now.
And we don't have,
Or you
we
have
don't
to-
have that metric.
Or you'd have to do like a 3-year rolling average or something like that, because year to year, you're going to get a lot
Yeah,
of.
that's not what we're doing, or that is what we're doing.
I should
How do you measure
suggest,
50%?
so I suggest, Brian, if you want to continue,
Yeah.
because the whole discussion about the goals, we can at some
Yeah,
point
yeah.
refine that and discuss that.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
I
these
think-
are good comments, but I think overall, we still need to save water based on the 2019 goals
Yeah.
going forward based on that baseline.
Sure. For me, the takeaway of this chart is that 15% goal seems to be working. I mean, you see a downward trajectory in the water use. And
The trend line's in the right
it's
direction.
in the right direction.
For
And
capita.
Can we do more? Yeah. I mean, I think we all know that we can do more. What specifically can we do? We all want to do something on staff, and we're working towards that, and we would love guidance on goals for sure.
But it looks like the absolute number, not per capita, has not declined significantly.
The total acre feet
The total acre feet.
is about constant.
Yeah, it's got a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, it's got a lot of ups and downs, and
Yeah.
that's going to correlate with weather and precipitation, I suspect. So we can dig into that a little bit. You guys good if I move on?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, we're really trying to develop a water efficiency strategic plan. So it's not a shotgun approach. So it's organized. It has that plan, do, check, act component. So if things aren't working, we can bring it back to our governance bodies and say, is this working? Is this not working? Let's make some changes. So I think the opportunities that I see and that I've worked with staff on to see is we need a dedicated full-time position that can handle this. There's a data and reporting component. There's a communications and outreach component. There is an enforcement component. And I believe that if you start looking at watering schedules, the program we had in Vail was even addresses on 3 days a week, odd addresses the other 3 days of the week. And then Monday was like a no watering day to catch up. And you can't water between certain hours. And so if you have a part-time water educator, I don't want to call them, they're not water cops, because our goal would be to educate and work collaboratively with homeowners. So that is a program we had in Vail. I see an opportunity to do that down here. And then ordinance adoption. What are the enforcement mechanisms? I think my desire would be to educate and work collaboratively with homeowners. And then, you do like warning letters, but eventually there would be a fine mechanism or potential shutoff if the same individual, 2 months in a row is irrigating the gutter and it's all just running down. Like that is egregious to me. So conceptually, that's one of the things that I'm thinking about. The ordinances. So for us to develop ordinances, we did a lot of research and development with the Front Range Drought Groups, the Water Conservation Board. What are other utilities doing? What are other cities doing around this? Katie, when I say staff draft, Katie drafted it, so thank you. And so now we have this draft to take to legal, which we have a meeting on June 8th, so next week, to speak with the city attorney about where these might fit into city code. And it would go to council review. I'm happy to spend some time putting it in front of you guys. I'm going to talk about the main tenets of some of these today anyway. I'm just not going to get into the weeds on line-by-line language today. The ability to declare a water supply emergency, not just from drought conditions or natural drought triggers, but from, let's say, a semi-truck or a car goes in Clear Creek and we lose our ability to treat that water. Or if we try to treat like a diesel fuel spill, it'll ruin parts of the plant. Or if the water treatment plant experiences an upset, we have chemical shortages or something like that. That would be an instance where we would issue a water supply emergency, and it would go down to that, like a strict level of enforcement. If people are irrigating during those times, it's a different enforcement mechanism. And then just an enforcement provision in general. What does that enforcement, what does that step progression look like? What should it look like for the city of Golden? We have some suggestions and recommendations, and we're working through that, but that's what we're working on right now. The big one that I've gotten a lot of emails from community members and had a lot of conversation around this specifically is the waste of water ordinance. This is the one that we're teeing up for Kathy, the city attorney, to review next week. It essentially touches on timing, which is already something we are encouraging residents to not water between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. It's going to look at the permits. So if people are planting new seed, it's only done during a certain time of the year, and they have a special permit, special use permit for that. Permits in other cities, like the golf course and parks at other cities, have special use permits, because if they were just going to water 3 days a week, there's too many irrigation zones. There's not enough pressure in the system to water all of the parks on 3 days, so you have to have some kind of rotation. The waste of water ordinance would speak to like not watering during high wind or rain, using a broom instead of a hose to clean your sidewalks and stuff like that. No pooling of water on your property, no flowing of water off your property or into the storm drains. It would require homeowners to repair leaks in their irrigation system, and would require hose shut off for car washing. There are some other provisions in there, but these are the main tenets of that.
Do you have statistics on who the major water users are? Is it parks, big parks? Is it industry? Is it actual homeowners? Is it indoor, outdoor homeowners? I mean, I'm wondering if the ordinance is addressing the big users.
Well, the ordinance is going to address essentially the waste of water. So it's not going to discriminate between a high user or a small HOA. If the small HOA is letting water pool or run off the property, that is going to be addressed as just a normal course of business. If, let's say, Jefferson County is using 10 times as much as that HOA, but they're still with just watering the grass and there's no runoff, that wouldn't necessarily be a violation, or they wouldn't get a ticket, right? I will say, this ties into the water goals. So most, I think it's like 95 or 97% of the indoor water makes it back to Clear Creek at some point through the collection system and through the wastewater plant. It's really the outdoor use that when you're irrigating a lawn, that water is gone forever. So for us, it's really a lot of value in focusing on the outdoor users. And some of the things that we're doing, we have the AquaHawk, which I talked about, the ability to filter high users. But the benefit of having a full-time position, something I can help with, and something we're talking about doing this year even, is inviting Jefferson County, inviting the school district, inviting HOAs into a room with us so we can talk to them and educate them about the trends of water conservation, water efficiency, the aridification of the West, the drought triggers, asking them to develop specific plans for different levels of drought. So instead of us being the enforcer or big brother and sending letters, it's just inviting them in for some education and outreach and working collaboratively and sharing ideas and things like that. So,
okay. So I understand that I understand your answer to Jill's question, but I'm still interested in the answer to Jill's question, which is can you help me put into perspective how individual users' water use, even if you want to consider outdoors because it doesn't get back into the creek, how that compares to parks or commercial industrial water use? Are they?
Is it 5%? Is it 50%? Is it 1%?
Is it the 80-20 rule? 80% is using 20% is using 80% of the water.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it a 95-5 rule?
Yeah.
So I would ask differently, maybe similar of what you're after. If we had 100% compliance with this ordinance, how much water would we save?
I can't say that right now. I don't know. I'd have to crunch the numbers and data for that.
I think maybe what we're trying to get to is before we would recommend an ordinance, to make sure we understand what impact is it worthwhile to do all of this because there are negatives to doing some of this. I mean, you can get sort of the nosy neighbors things, and you get people calling in, all sorts of things that sort of, I mean, you're emphasizing the education, which is good. I completely agree with that. But when you get to the ordinance level and you get letters and fines and all the social ramifications to that side, is that worth it in a sense that we would be saving significant amounts of water, or is it down into that 5% where it's better to go and get the golf course to go to Xeriscape, and that would have saved us far more than we would have spending all the money on this.
Xeriscape golf course.
Yeah, there is actually. Links courses, you just water the little part, the putting part. So.
I think that question, if we can't answer it today, we're struggling with the same questions, right?
Yeah.
We want to get to 15% reduction. We know we got to do more. Where is the best bang for the buck? And causing least friction.
Yeah.
And this, for me, all of these things are common sense. I also wonder how many people in Golden would violate any of these. I know at some point we probably violate because, heck, we don't see that it's raining and we are on auto with our irrigation, right? Mm-hmm. So I think figuring out what the estimated, I mean, if you're thinking strategic, I think it is good to consider all of these no-brainer actions, and I know the council has supported those as well in communication in the past. I do think it is important to at least have an estimate how much we may be saving with that. And there are a few other items that we also at some point, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is right now the time, Brian, to give you feedback on the ordinance,
Sure.
or if you want to.
So the part I was going to suggest is that I'm keeping track of some of your questions, and I think it would be appropriate that we meet outside of this. We'll collect some more data. I know Katie's been working on some of the breakdown that you're asking for, and we'll bring back that information to you before.
And we may be wrong with the estimates, right? But at least we have a target and can benchmark later on towards whether we have the impact.
Question about neighbors. There is a part of the ordinance where it does say that this will be determined by the utility. So it's not something that we're trying to, get people to
Tell a tale on your neighbor.
That's in
They will
there, so-
anyways.
They will.
Well,
Well, they are now.
Yeah.
It's happening now.
Right. I mean, there's an opportunity here. If everyone all of a sudden fell into compliance in my neighborhood and I didn't see streams of water going down my gutters when I'm walking the dog in the morning, that there would be an impact if everyone fell into compliances. But how much of the impact is?
Does Safeway use 1,000 times as much as you save with that measure? I'm sure that's not the case. But if they did, you would want it.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest impact with this is going to be if someone fails to repair a leak that we've contacted them for, say, a year about. Right now, we have no authority to do anything, and so at that point, if it's a huge leak and it's something that's ongoing, then at that point we would shut off the water and they would have to fix it, or we would have to get someone in to fix it.
So that's more on the enforcement
So it
side,
would-
yeah.
Yeah, so it would save a larger quantity with issues like that.
Well, and right now the other component of that is you pay more, right? Because it's a
Right.
tiered
And you
payment
also pay
system.
more, so it's just.
So maybe is that enough incentive,
That's-
which is more of a carrot kind of thing than giving a ticket, I don't know.
Is the water rate tiered?
Yeah, here it is.
Yes.
I've never hit the second tier.
Well,
So
that's great.
can we just make the second tier 100 times as much?
There's,
Yeah.
I'm serious.
there's 3 tiers, and we live in the first tier during the winter, and that's I think what it's designed to be like, basic indoor use season, and then outdoor we go above, and it's almost impossible not to if you have a grass, which is the other.
So
ordinance
we
I
can talk
encourage.
about that. I think we discussed that at some point too,
Sure.
to change the financials. There are other, and we can talk about that, but rather than educating each other right now on that, there are other waste of water components that you could consider adding in there that we discussed. I don't think we made an official decision as a board, but I do believe we had a discussion about ornamental grass and how important is it. So down, for example, golf course, all that area that's Johnson Road, there's a lot of ornamental grass that falls on the city and takes a lot of spray irrigation. So I guess my question or comment is, these are focused primarily on use of water and waste of water and how it's used. Is there consideration to think about changing over, consequently starting with the city, where do we have ornamental grass and do we need it everywhere?
Oh, like the Las Vegas, isn't it Las Vegas? It's
I
basically.
think Las Vegas did it
Yeah.
everywhere for everybody private, we could phase in, anyway,
I was wondering about something similar.
Yeah, we could do that, and if if you look at it through the lens of like biggest bang for your buck, there's no question that turf grass in general is the biggest waste of water. So if you want to target, go ahead.
No, I want you to finish.
If you want to target non-functional grass, or target is the wrong word. If you want to coach people to not use non-functional grass, yeah, Aurora's doing that. We have looked at that. We have draft ordinances ready to go. So, we're all for it, yeah. Looking at the city's use, if there's an opportunity for the city, I think that's an easy one, just.
So what I've observed in your presentation, though, is several things that are accommodating of people irrigating their lawns. But what you've just said is people ought not to be irrigating their lawns, or not to have lawns at all.
That's not a position that's like really like publicly acceptable to tell the homeowner to rip up their lawns.
I'm ready, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm not actually proposing telling anyone what to do. But I do wonder if we should structure the ordinance, if we should try to structure ordinances, goals, and incentives to get rid of the grass, instead of make it so that people who insist on irrigating their grass use a bit less water.
Halfway.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, let's do it. And one way to do it is to make the second tier $1 million a gallon. People will stop irrigating.
Tim, we heard it. I think we pass it on. In the interest of time, I just hear from Teresa that you're halfway through your presentation. I would suggest if you just want to go all the way through,
Okay.
and we structure our questions afterwards.
Sounds good. Again, talking about water supply emergency ordinance, so looking at a provision where we would have some enforcement mechanism for people to stop using water in an emergency or curtail their use. Again, talking about the specific enforcement ordinances in development, these are modeled largely off of what other utilities are doing in this region. Actually, you don't technically see education outreach support in the enforcement ordinance. It's just like another program, but I always like to start there. And it's a typically formal warning, fine 1, fine 2, and then a shut off. I mean, there are tiered rate structures too, but that's not specific to like an enforcement mechanism. So that's what other utilities are doing in the area, and we would envision something similar to that. I'm going to talk a little bit about drought triggers. So drought planning is complex. The chart that you see there is confusing. There's a lot of words in there. There's a lot of data in there. It's not intended to be a clean read for you all, because it's confusing for me to read that. And I'm like, nobody in the public is going to understand. Did you hear? That's not a dig. But what we're talking about collaboratively is refining those triggers a little bit, so it's a little easier to understand how we get into each of those triggers. So under normal restrictions, if Golden's water storage, if Clear Creek flows are normal, the drought is a D0 or D1 level, the South Platte Basin storage with other utilities is above normal or average or above a certain percentage, because that dictates how much water from Clear Creek goes in to fill those reservoirs. South Platte snow water equivalent if applicable, Colorado snow water equivalent if applicable. So looking at all of those, and if we're on the fence, is it like a weighted average of these, or is it any 4 of these conditions fall into the next category? Do we issue a more restrictive watering structure? So if we go into normal restrictions would be 3 days watering is what we have now, right? Like we don't want people to water every day. You have to adhere to certain times of the day. If we're in that next drought stage, DS1, it would go down to 2 days per week of outdoor watering. If you go into the next drought condition, it'd be 1 day of watering per week, and DS3 could be something like hand watering perennial shrubs only. And again, that's modeled off of Aurora and Denver Water's drought triggers. So it's conceptually, we're trying to just make it easier to understand for everyone. Does that make sense for folks? So how that ties into efficiency and enforcement is something to think about as well. Moving on to water resiliency. So I explained this earlier to Tanya is I was thinking about it as like 4 pillars of resiliency. There's efficiency and conservation, which is regardless of the drought conditions, you want to have an efficiency and conservation plan in place. I think the city needs to be doing that. Water utilities need to be doing that regardless of whether it's a wet year or dry year. We need to have water emergencies, a plan for outages, power outages, chemical delivery issues, source quality, natural disasters. We're also looking at wildfire and continuity planning. So what are the source water protections in the watershed that we can do? And we're doing a lot of efforts on that. What can we do with the treatment plant to improve the capacity and resiliency of the treatment plant to treat various chemicals? What alternative sources are available for us to develop? So that could be off-channel reservoirs that we might develop in the future. You know, we could pump water to a newly constructed reservoir. We could dredge out the holding pond by the campground. We have some groundwater rights that we could develop. It's really expensive. I've seen like a $20 million price tag, so that's something we're looking at to refine that redundancy. And then continuity. So if all of our staff have to evacuate for a wildfire, how are we going to operate the plant when we can't physically get in here? We're looking at water rights and storage. So obviously drought planning, those triggers, is very much up for us. What about long-range planning? Do we have enough storage? We've identified the need for 800 acre-feet of storage capacity above what we have now. And so that would create a firm yield in dry years for the city of Golden, and we're working with various partners to achieve that goal. And then AWWA would talk about resiliency in terms of cybersecurity and physical security aspects, which are also very much focused on. Let's see, resiliency ongoing efforts. We were looking at the water efficiency program refinements. My colleague Carrie Major, who's on maternity leave, started the Clear Creek Watershed and Forest Health Protection. It's a partnership essentially between Thornton, Arvada, Clear Creek County, Gilpin County, and there's an MOU and an agreement to coordinate wildfire mitigation activities within the watershed. So it's not going to the Forest Service saying, hey, Forest Service, you need to thin up this. We're going to work collaboratively. A lot of the land that's going to burn is not on Forest Service property. It's looking at our emergency planning, re-examining our drought triggers, evaluating treatment, future storage, communications and outreach, and groundwater development. So any questions on resiliency planning or efforts there?
I think there is an implicit value for what we're using the water. So when you, for example, said how we are, how we compare to Aurora, people in Golden may think, well, Aurora has very junior water rights. Why do we in Golden need to save as much water as Aurora? And I'm not taking even a stand, because I think it's a very ethical question ultimately that we need to face in the Front Range. But I do think it is important to be explicit for what we are staging water uses. So, for example, everybody needs water to drink. We need to have enough water at home.
Yep.
But the next tiers now becomes questionable to different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we not irrigate trees, and in the next year we have drought harm on our trees in our yard? What about the White Water Park in the creek, right? So there are all these uses, and I think it would help in terms of resiliency to be explicit about the drought stages of what is acceptable to take sacrifices.
Sure.
So that we find agreement in a community and everybody understands the implication.
Yeah, and that's a good comment, and that data largely exists in the existing drought plan. It was just too busy to put on a slide. So I tried to just pare it down for presentation's sake.
I know you mentioned that you worked previously in Vail, right?
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I remember them mentioning that the golf course has some sort of like groundwater underneath. Have you heard of that? Or like some sort of cistern or something where they're collecting? Does that sound familiar at all?
It does not.
Okay, I'll look into that again, because I went to COSA, which is a conference for open space.
Okay.
And they mentioned some of the resiliency things that the town of Vail was doing for their golf course, like different certifications too.
And so, Samantha, relevance to Golden is for you to look at rain catchment and substitute
Storage.
potable water with rainwater for irrigation and storing that. Is that
Yeah,
what-
or just like implementing, I mean, we can talk about it later, but like best management practices, like vegetated swales or porous pavement, like just kind of the things that have
And I
been,
thought the golf course was actually using purple water.
yeah, recycled water.
They were using raw water, which is diverted off of the creek and not,
Okay, so
it's just not
purple water,
treated.
okay.
Yeah. So it's not a post-treatment purple water, but it's a pre-treatment.
Yeah. Any other comments on the resilience?
I'd second, I guess, just I think it's helpful to have a visual for communication of like, you know, just drought numbers or it's level 3, that's a pretty abstract thing, no matter how you
Sure.
choose to define it. Like, what does that start to look like for your landscaping, for the availability of, you know, do community pools get closed in the summer? Is splash not a thing anymore? You know, but to really make it specific and to the degree possible. Another question I had, I think, is do we have climate models that feed at this level? What are we predicting in our water? We must have some predictions for 20 years from now at this
Well, and
point.
similarly, what have we experienced? So that people be like, oh, I remember 2012 was really dry.
Right.
What drought level was that? So that people have a little bit more of a sense of what it felt like.
Yeah.
Teresa, did we ever share the final water efficiency plan that Anne finished with everybody?
I think we did, but maybe not with the new members yet.
Okay.
But that there is a point in here about that this board had asked about regional climate studies that could be predictive and talk about the impacts of hotter climate on all components of the system, so on supply, on distribution, on treatment, being able to take it off of the creek, and to be able to integrate some of the citations of those studies, those regional studies, not necessarily a national study, but there's some done in Colorado, into some of the plans. I think the water department, before Brian was here, we had talked about putting it in the drought plan because that was the most recent plan that was going to go for adoption. And so I think Ken and Tanya and I looked at some climate studies to put into the drought plan as citations. But probably more broadly, what we're interested in is those forecasted impacts of anticipating hotter, drier weather and what that actually might do to some of these. So it's good that there's drought triggers and enforcement and ordinances, but then to forecast a scenario of what this is.
That's where I would go with it mentally, because like to me, a drought is like a bad year. But we're not looking at that. We're looking at kind of desertification, right? Like a process that's beyond just a bad year.
Multi-decade.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a section added to the water efficiency plan referring to climate.
I thought there was, so maybe we can just share that again.
I would
Yeah.
be happy to see that
The new
again.
members.
Sure, I'll send that
Or
out.
to see it.
You know, the other thing, just from a policy standpoint, you know, maybe not noted in here, like if the city of Golden wants to be an industry leader in water efficiency, you know, you have to look to areas like Vegas and Tucson in the Middle East, and what are their policies and what are they using? And what are the citizens of Golden willing to pay for when it comes to reuse? And, you know, that it's not $1 million question, but it's a question. The turf replacement stuff, you're seeing that no longer be an extreme ordinance. It's coming more mainstream, and those types of things are in our queue right behind these things. And so if we need to shift how we implement those, we're happy to do that.
You know, from the culture of Golden, we have a number of ordinances that in a way are related to what we're discussing right now. So take, for example, your trash bin shouldn't be visible from the street. You should cut your vegetation so that it doesn't overhang on the sidewalk. We have those, and they do trigger a change in people, but I would say from our culture in the city, we have the enforcement, you know, with the level 1 tier, you can think that through, very theoretical, and you can implement it. The culture of Golden is more that this is not necessarily as hardly enforced. While I still would say that the ordinances, having those, make sense because it's more of a moral question and a social pressure, and it does, I think, create change. but the enforcement part is less vigilantly,
Sure,
executed.
yeah. That's fair.
And it all, once we get in an extreme drought year, I think people will also support having a more vigilant enforcement. So,
I agree with that. I also think that we can realize a lot of benefit and value in water savings just by working collaboratively with the largest water users and just inviting them into the room and having these conversations around, let's push the needle. You don't need this ornamental turf in the parking lot. It's just
Well, at a municipal level, I think the median strips that have water dependent, that's just stupid. Let's get rid of that. It's harder with private property and the cost of re-landscaping. We're wrestling with that ourselves right now. But you can drive behaviors. You're more likely to want to drive them if it's a significant percentage of the water use in the city, and that data would be useful.
And I also think that we manage water, so we don't necessarily control or dictate the behavior of parks, right? And I don't want to pick on any one department. But if the city were to make an adoption or an ordinance to say, we're no longer going to do this, then the conversation's over. Something else is going to happen. There's no convincing, hey, this would be great if we did this.
I suspect our park system is the largest user of water in the city of Golden, right?
I'm not sure.
So are those numbers available?
I think it's the cemetery is the number one user.
So we definitely have the numbers, but I think what I heard is that we should bring you back maybe a report that compares different land uses as far as in terms of the ability of this waste of water ordinance to potentially conserve versus what some of the higher waters users are using, and that if the board has a recommendation that might support the waste of water ordinance, it would be in part based on the ability to kind of achieve those gains, in addition to what I think I heard Tanya talk about with the other values about the messages and the education that the waste of water ordinance is sending.
Yeah, I think we still have 10 minutes, right, on the agenda for that item. Brian, is this your last slide? Did you have? Not that.
The thank you
Another
slide,
picture.
yeah.
Could we just-
It's a very green, grassy thing you've got on your picture there.
It's definitely a nice picture. Could we go around? Hey, Allison, good to have you. Could we just go around and everybody takes 30 minutes to 30 seconds to a minute to just any things that you still want to share? Could we start with you?
I just would like to see some data. That's my main comment. I mean, I think the initiatives are great, but until we know who the main users are and what impact it's going to be, it's impossible for me to get behind any particular activity.
Okay.
Same. I don't believe it's an 80-20. I think it's probably a 95-5 rule where 5% of the users are using 95% of the water.
And that speaks directly to the uses that this ordinance tries to address.
Right.
Okay.
I maybe just more information on the land use and zoning, and I just wrote down maybe if there's any agricultural zones with ranchers and farmers and because their water use is probably between 10 a.m. and 6 and how that's handled. And then also just about the special use permit with the golf course and how if they're usually exceedance or in compliance and how it relates to Aurora golf courses.
Sure. Okay.
So I just want to make one quick comment. In 2020, right, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong. In 2020, we set out for a water conservation because at the time it looked like in early 2020 that we would head into a drought. The number one water saving that actually did a large part of what the city was able to save as water was the golf course. I think they got actually also a reward did we give them a reward for water conservation?
There might have been a recognition of something.
So it may be, and this picture, seems to pull us all into the water conservation of the golf course, the culprit, but they did more than the rest of the city of Golden did to really bail us out with the statistics for that year. That's what Anne concluded after so just a quick in defense of the golf course. I'm not a golfer. Anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay.
I'd also like to see more data, and if we already know that the solution to our problems is eliminating turf lawns, I'd like to see less about cutting the water use of irrigated lawns and more about cutting the number of irrigated lawns. Also, nothing bad happens if you just stop watering.
In an HOA, that's not entirely true.
Your turn.
Okay, well, the thing I would add, because it's especially high profile right now, we talked about it just a little bit before the meeting started, is the fire, resiliency also in the wake of the Louisville and Boulder fires. That, one of the solutions to, increasing your fire resiliency in your house is like chopping down the trees and clear cutting and everything within, and it'd be really nice to tie this water conservation with xeriscape and natural grasses, and like to tie a plan that makes it really accessible for city residents and maybe businesses to address the fire concern, which everyone has right now, while really doing a lot of good for the water use.
And that's where you get conflicting
you can get
things. Like if you have an irrigated lawn, you have less of a fire issue.
Right, so that's what I'm like, right.
And if you have trees, you have less of an energy use.
So I think if you can if you can come up with an answer that overlaps with both, you're not going to have this and this. Because the fire one has got a lot of attention right now.
Yeah.
Sure. If I might drop a thought around parks and the golf course, those are public gathering places. The parks bring a lot of people into the city to spend money. There's an economic multiplier. And so, I think you want to encourage parks to conserve, or especially the non-functional turf grass, and parks are a great place for people to come and enjoy themselves.
I think the cemetery is one of the highest water use places in the city of Golden, but I don't know how to
address that.
I don't know how to address there, though.
The turf in a park where people are doing picnics and soccer is functional.
Yeah, it's functional.
So that wouldn't be covered by a non-functional turf grass.
Agreed.
Anything else? I just have 3 things quickly. The full-time equivalent, that will be kudos to you if you make that work. I would recommend that we think, and maybe even you can coordinate, we have a need probably for other areas in the city for additional staff. And thinking about how your needs from a water management perspective could tie together with what the city is concerned about, and fire comes to mind immediately, may help get that approved faster. It may also be helpful to think about how, if anything, because we think Teresa is very overloaded, how there are synergies so that whatever you could potentially give up as efforts that you're tracking under the sustainability related to water, if that could be a nice synergy to free up some of her time as well. Yep. If I think that would also make it easier for you to get that through the city, and maybe it's easy by now, I don't know. And then I just want to know, what are the next, how can we support what you're doing? What are the next steps here? You showed that initial portion, but it was very much a center right now on the ordinance. Yep. There's probably in the strategic plan other areas and other strategies that you're targeting as well.
Yeah, so the waste of water ordinance is the one that really requires council buy-in and your all support. And so we're happy to look at that in more detail. Some of the things that we're just doing on our own accord, because it's the right programmatic thing to do, is to support and look at the largest users. And so that's just embedded into our daily workload. We have Katie looks at it. Les, the utilities superintendent, looks at it. We have a part-time sampler that's filling in for Carrie, because she's on maternity leave. So that person is collecting samples and is doing some public outreach around not waste of water specifically, but targeting those highest users in our system. So we're already doing that just because that's our job. So that's what we're doing.
Did you say that you're already planning a meeting where you're inviting high users, et cetera, is that something where it would be beneficial for our board to know about and support you in that event?
We were looking at doing one to include the HOAs and some of the bigger water users, but we haven't put anything on the calendar yet.
Okay,
But
I
it
think,
is definitely a discussion.
I think that would be beneficial if we have time to send somebody from our side as well, to hear those discussions and, because, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'd be happy to go to an HOA one because I live in one.
Yeah, I do too.
I was just wondering, how has conversations gone with HOAs and like talking about like short grass prairies or anything where it's like it looks overgrown and you're not supposed to mow it at all?
Right.
Are they receptive to like?
Well, to be fair, we haven't technically had a conversation, a formal like meeting with HOAs. It's on our radar for something to do this summer.
Okay.
So we can bring that up.
Or like seed mixes or something to kind of help
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Very good. So, and I think communicating, you said that, communicating that it's not taking something away. But there are so many examples of, you had one there, where, just the diversity is much higher, it looks more attractive. Let's face it, bluegrass is really not that attractive. It's pretty boring.
Easy.
So I think showing those photos to HOAs can help showing them that the quality of life can actually improve.
Well, if the trajectory is almost certainly the cost of water is going to go up, and up as it gets more and more scarce, there's a financial incentive to get ahead of that for the HOAs because managing their, association costs is part of their job. So.
Good.
Sorry if you already covered this, but did the monthly billing change people's water consumption? Switching from quarterly to monthly?
I don't know. I'll have to look at that.
I'm just curious because people, like, especially in the summer, like, you might see that and you're like, oh, next month I'm going to do
That would be
something different, but
It would be a good statistic because now we have 2 years of monthly billing and we have 1 or 2 years of the tiered approach.
yeah.
And I know that the 2020 pandemic is non-representative. We had very low water consumption, but maybe 2021 we should have that data now, so that may be interesting.
Yeah, I can play the I'm the new guy card for a little bit longer.
Oh,
2020 we kind of have to toss because
It's such a weird year.
Normal.
Yeah.
We actually use more from people being at home watering.
I was going to say,
Okay.
I thought it went up.
Restaurants.
Oh, I think it went down. I thought we had extremely low water consumption during the pandemic
No.
because we had no businesses.
I
Yeah.
do have charts for that.
Okay. Yeah,
Well,
let's
that
look
might
at
imply that
that.
it's residential
Trash-
water use
trash
is one of
went
the
way up.
Ann
things.
told me it was
Yeah.
like 1 point something, 1.5 on the water treatment plant.
First month it did go down, but then it jumped.
Okay, well, that's
That's
why
the data.
it's good to have the data.
Well, I appreciate your time. I'm happy you guys are engaged and want to provide some guidance to us. So keep the ideas and the refining, the direction coming. It's useful for us. We'll go back and chat about some strategies. Some of the stuff we're talking about is not a big lift, in my opinion. The big lift is just getting it approved by council. Like the draft ordinances, laws are already out there. I'm a big fan of the case method, which is copy and steal everything. So it's really easy to plug and play those into city ordinance if there's an appetite for it. So
Well, welcome to Golden Brine,
thank you.
and you dove in very quickly in 2 months, so.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
You guys, you all have my card. If you need something,
Yeah,
feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
I'll email you so you have my contact info for each other to see.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
I think if what I heard is, what I'll do is work with Brian and Katie to collect some of these figures that I took notes on all of your questions. We'll come back to you kind of with a memo that we'll provide to you so that you can review at your leisure. And then if you're, when we have some draft ordinances, we can show those to you. And then if you're comfortable with endorsing something, but not before, then we can decide if the board wants to make a formal recommendation of support when Brian goes to council with wastewater anyway.
Yeah, I think it would be good to see a draft of that ordinance whenever it's out. It seems like they have already something to show legal next week. It may help him for us to see that earlier than later.
Yeah.
So if we have, general feedback on it, we can provide it earlier. All the questions we asked related to data are questions that the city has too. So that should not be just a memo that goes to us. It may be beneficial for Brian and his group to put that under the sustainability or water department on the web, because people may be interested in that.
And I think some of the confusion, so Brian's been great. He's seated an internal group that is talking about this every week for the next couple of months, so they can get through some of these ordinances. But we've been talking about exactly that sometimes we're talking about different metrics, and so we need to be on the same page about the methodology of how we calculate these things, about what metrics we're using. Even if they're wrong for right now, we need to be on the same page. And I think both of you were correct. Anne probably said that we are reducing water because our acre foot diversion has been steadily decreasing, but what we saw was an increase in consumption. Those two aren't necessarily in conflict, but they seem very, very opposite, right? So that is just another kind of case that we need to be on the same page about how we're describing some of the conservation and the use, but we'll get you that data.
Well, your comment about whose job is this? I think I'm gonna have to go back and try to. I mean, a big chunk of our metrics. I guess one of them is water usage, right? And if that's, so there's overlap and that's fine, but is it the right amount of overlap, or is there inefficiency just with whose domain is what? If you can get an ordinance through and that's solving our problems, that's less work for you, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think Brian's going to take the lead on this, and I think we're going to finally get some metrics that we can publish across every webpage, on our page, in their reports, and that we're saying the same
Which
numbers.
is how it should be. Whatever we came up with, sustainability, at some point it should be mainstream and going into the respective departments, so we can take on the next thing, which is good evolution. Should we, in the interest of time, move on to the next agenda item? So, citywide recycling ordinance. Just quickly to set the stage, I think all new members know that, but maybe not. End of last year, we got a new hauler, we got new contractual conditions. Most of us are in a composting and recycling program. You can opt out, you may still pay for it, but there are exceptions for that, multifamily and commercial. And so that, you want to give an update on where we're standing with that? Please, Teresa.
Sure, thank you. And so part of the original sustainability initiative, the comments from residents was to have recycling and or compost citywide. Because of legal reasons, we cannot compel multifamily and commercial to join the single hauler program. There's a state ordinance that prevents local governments from being able to. We can ask them to voluntarily join, and several have, but we can't require that. So the mechanism for offering citywide recycling or compost service is really through a citywide ordinance. And that ordinance isn't a program necessarily that provides a service. It's an ordinance on all of the haulers that operate in the city of Golden. And there are other communities that already have this citywide ordinance, like Fort Collins. And what an ordinance does is sets a hauler licensing program, which we already have in place. It requires that haulers provide recycle and or compost, depending on what you choose, to all of their multifamily accounts, all of their commercial accounts, and embed it in the pricing of their trash. So Boulder has this, Boulder County has the citywide or countywide ordinance, I guess, as well. There are penalties for not providing it. There is annual reporting. There's actually more than annual reporting. It's probably quarterly reporting to make sure that haulers are providing that and that they're providing data. Data is something that we've been missing for a long time as well, not being able to kind of quantify the amount of trash and also the amount of diversion that multifamily and commercial properties are doing. So that also gets us the data piece. So the update is that in order for that kind of a program or suggestion or recommendation to go to City Council, we were ramping up for a public outreach kind of a period where we would contact a lot of multifamily places in Golden, lots of commercial outfits in Golden, and say, this is what we're thinking of. These would be the likely impacts to you as the organization, because the costs do get passed on to the folks that are paying for the service. What do you think about that? What do you think about being able to have these services? There are some equity benefits in this, in that a lot of multifamily residential don't get to choose that option. So if you're a renter, if you're low-income housing, or you might have other constraints, you don't, the choice of getting access to recycling services or compost services isn't always in your control. So the ordinance does kind of propose to level the playing field a little bit and provide access to different user groups. I did talk with a couple of Boulder County and City of Fort Collins. They gave us great lessons learned about how they rolled out their program. So a lot of it's timing, a lot of it's upfront communication beforehand, and we've kind of gathered that and are preparing that for the analysis. So this month, starting, I guess today's the 1st, so technically I should start on this today. For the month of June, we as staff are going to be working on kind of vetting what the policy alternatives would be within an ordinance. There will be some decisions for this board to recommend and for City Council to consider when it gets to that point. So we'll be kind of identifying what those are, vetting the legalities of different options, and kind of just collecting that information. And then what we've got as far as an outreach plan is July, June and July really, to finish outreach to as many multifamily and commercial properties as we can. When we're talking scale and we talk about the energy code stakeholder effort later, that's kind of a different scale that we're doing a big outreach. This is a little bit smaller. This is surveys asking a certain number of what they folks what they think, and getting that kind of input, making sure that we're correct on their concerns and accurately representing what some of those impacts would be. We'll come back to you then in at the July 27th meeting and present to you the policy alternatives, formulate a recommendation that you could consider that would, if you endorsed, would go to City Council for review, and summarize the public input in that as well. We'll put a timeline with those things, because a citywide ordinance requires a little bit of lead time to get people to not only understand what's coming down the line, but to prepare for things. There are certain considerations, like for parking and for dumpster enclosures, that might need to be resized, and timelines for that as well. So the memo I put in your packet is actually from February that we didn't get to, but it just kind of lays out that timeline where we'll come back to you at the end of July with this information after we do some of the kind of initial input. What do I have here? And that meeting in July is really just the review of the policy alternatives. It's not your final recommendation to City Council. Then in August, we'd also meet with and do the surveys. The other thing we need to do is meet with Planning Commission. So maybe Todd can help us grease the wheels of going back to Planning Commission and really talk about if we have to ask for any modifications to the parking ordinance. There will be older multifamily and commercial properties that are have the minimum number of parking required, and they have a dumpster enclosure, but if they have to enlarge the dumpster enclosure, it's going to take away a parking space or two. So there might be a parking amendment for the ordinance that we could consider, or a waiver, or like a long-term compliance timeline. Boulder uses 10 years to get people to have to come into compliance with increasing their dumpster enclosure sizes. So if we compile all of those results and input, your final review is really September 28th, and then you would send a recommendation if you agreed to City Council for October. We can't really control when Council would review that, but it would probably be in the last quarter of this year, and then they would have a public review and consider what you've kind of pulled together.
Thank you, Teresa.
Sure.
Does it make sense right now to go briefly through what you're envisioning for July, since this is just a month out? But I think we only have one more meeting before.
Yeah.
So in any case, could we just recap what you think will be in this alternative policy evaluation? Would that help you also on the considerations that you may get and how to flush that out? Because right now, I know we discussed it, and generally this is all in line with what we gave a recommendation as a board, but I'm missing right now the recollection of what specifically we're asking in this ordinance for. So when I look at the policy directions here, one is at the owners to actually prepare their property sites in a way that this pickup is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that we discussed that specifically for downtown Golden. There are sort of insurmountable, I don't know if it's always up to the property owner of the stores to make that happen, or if there's city. So that's one thing that I would just like to hear a little bit more about. And then there is some direction to the haulers to actually supply the service. That, so how does it, what all, can you just briefly outline what all this ordinance may entail? Are these truly alternatives, or do we need to have all of these components in order to make this happen?
No, there's some different ways of doing this. So one of the biggest policy decisions is whether or not this board wants to recommend both recycling and compost to become citywide ordinance, or whether you want to start with something like recycling and then add compost in later years. So there's that changes how we
Should we
then
talk about that one first? Can we briefly go through all of these, or do you want to give an overview and then we go around and give some input?
That's I don't need to give too much more of an overview of what.
Well, let's go through.
The way
so
that
the question is recycling and composting, either or both. Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
I don't really have identified all of those alternatives. It's something that we're still researching with the other ordinances and interviewing those other cities. So
okay.
We'd have to come back to you, and I can't really say what some of those alternatives would be right now, but before we're ready to go to the public with this, we would kind of come to a policy strategy that then we could kind of portray this as this is the scenario that the board is looking at.
Okay.
And these are the impacts that would be, to you based on if it's recycle and compost at the same time.
Teresa, how does this interface with the House Bill, what is it, 1355 that passed? But you sent the attachment about the recycling, the statewide.
Oh, the producer
recycling.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it passed, and it's happening in 2026.
It passed. I'm not aware that the governor signed it yet. I think that we were waiting on that to hear about that a week or two ago. So I haven't heard whether or not he signed it.
Yeah, maybe I haven't either.
I believe that the impact of that for Golden, since we already have recycling and compost for some of our residents, is it would be a cost offset for the single hauler program, and then it would probably be a provision to offset the costs for recycling for multifamily and commercial.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the concept is it's recycling in the state is going to be provided, and the intention is specifically to increase the recycling rate from our abysmal 15%, but also to reach underserved populations, some of which are rural, and some of which are these multifamily homes, apartment complexes.
Right, so that is part of this month's legal review, is to say, the state, we don't have their rulemaking yet. They have to see the task force, and then they have to decide the rules around how that's all going to work.
Yeah.
So we don't quite know the mechanism of how how Golden Knights are going to receive money through that program. We do think that it's going to come through the single hauler program, and then probably either to the haulers or to individuals that receive recycling service. It's subsidized in some way. But that is one of the components of the legal review this month, is to say, can we set up a program that anticipates that there's going to be a benefit
Right,
coming
so it's
in?
a financial offset, but not necessarily a whole new program that has to go in for
Yeah.
multifamily.
In some respects, I would expect it to be easier to consider a citywide ordinance because it wouldn't be so impactful in coming years. The producer responsibility bill, I believe, we wouldn't see a whole lot of financial impact to the community until about 2028. So it's a little ways off, but still coming.
You mentioned there are mechanisms for leveling the playing field. Are you referring to giving low-income residents access to recycling, or defraying the extra costs that are going to be passed on to them if we require that their haulers offer recycling?
So it could be both. I think initially we were referring to it in the first part, which is they don't have the choice to get access because their property manager, their landlord, doesn't want to pay for it, and they can't control getting their own services. So the equity issue is that it would be provided to all no matter what. But I do think that City Council has always asked your second question, which is, are there ways that we can either defray the costs for specific user groups like low-income, things like that? The single hauler program does do that for multifamily in the rate system. Multifamily complexes that come onto the program are automatically paying a lower cost per unit within that system. But how could we do that for other folks that aren't in the single hauler program too?
Right, that's we would be creating a new problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
That low-income residents that join this new, whose haulers are suddenly required to offer recycling are going to pass along the new cost.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it sounds like I'm asking the same question the council asks, which is how do we protect the vulnerable residents from the increase?
Yes.
Is it still a question, or is there an answer?
It's still a question.
Okay.
And so what I will do is take your question and make sure that we address it during this month, and when we come back to
And
your
you're saying it's
solutions.
2028 before the city, at the state level.
Just
Right,
pop that, I
right.
guess. Yeah.
And well, seems like we don't need to wait that long for some of this.
I think so. I might not risk a wager on that one, but I seem to remember that reading some of the impacts of the bill, that it could be as long as 2028 before the state has the commission seated and then the rulemaking process done, and then the producers have deadlines to pay into the
Right, I didn't see a
system.
timeline associated with the
Yeah.
material I read on that.
Yeah. So
And we have another contract.
by then, yes. Right.
Any other questions on the topic? Teresa, the effort, if I see this right, the effort in the next month or two is an outreach and a summary of evaluation of the policy alternatives.
Mhm.
In terms of the outreach, since Brian also mentioned that he's going to talk to HOAs, you're going to talk to HOAs. Both of you probably talk to commercial and businesses.
Yeah.
I think end of this summer, when we know from some years ago that businesses usually do not like to talk about anything else but keeping up with the visitors in summer months, I think it's important to coordinate these outreach activities. And I don't know, I found actually these meetings that we had downtown where we invited people right that one time. I took away from that this is way more impactful if you get the people in the room and you talk to them
Yes.
than postcards.
Yeah.
I can also foresee, I think it would help, it could help Brian to have you in the room when he talks about water conservation, because you know the culture of Golden very well. And it's how you frame these ordinances to make them either palatable for people, and yes, sure, that's what we need, or it looks more as the policing in action. And I think you have a good sense from your decades of working in the city of how to frame that to get the support that may help him too. So what I'm saying is somehow you two should coordinate on these outreach activities so that he gets off with a really strong footing.
Absolutely, and I'm going to make sure that he knows about an effort that is kind of already being planned for downtown businesses. There is a meeting coming up. It is that multiple issue format that you're talking about, lots of different city programs. I'm going to go talk about the energy code things. We'll talk about this waste project as well, and I'll make sure Brian knows about it for the water conservation effort as well.
And are there dates that we should be aware of to join that?
I think that they're defining that now, but...
Okay, could you let us know and send that out to all of us? If we have time, I'm sure we have an interest to listen in and sense a bit the feedback in the room from people.
Sure.
Anything else on that topic? Okay, so to summarize, end of July is when we get a draft for the policy evaluation that we comment on, or we can discuss it then again.
Yep.
And that would be, we would discuss it then in our July meeting.
Yeah.
Right? That's okay. So the second meeting tomorrow.
Right.
Okay. All right, should we move on to, oh, and just to bring that attachment to a closure, that was more on the producer recycling bill, that was more FYI at this point? All right. Should we move on to the electric vehicle master plan?
Sure. So we've had some change in timeline for this one, but in front of you is a hard copy. I will send you the electronic versions, but wanted you to have what the internal staff have been reviewing recently. It's shaping up, but it's not complete. This is the effort that we are compiling and creating the first electric vehicle master plan for the city fleet. So we started from scratch last fall and started with I'm going to go through a little bit of background if it's okay, just for everybody.
I think it's good because half of us have maybe not followed that.
Sounds good.
Take the time.
The city's experimented with a couple of different things, but nothing very seriously in terms of fleet vehicles. We've had a couple of hybrids. We've had no electric vehicles. We've had some electrified equipment for the last 12 years, but we needed to take it seriously and have a plan for the fleet. So about 2 years ago, this board considered the Go EV campaign. And the Go EV campaign is out of an organization called SWEEP, the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project out of Boulder. It's a nonprofit that looks at a lot of different things like energy codes in buildings, alternative transportation. And the Go EV campaign is kind of a comprehensive strategy that, when adopted, we systematically look at all of the components of electrifying transportation. It seemed to fit us pretty well. So the components of that, and this board recommended to City Council that the city adopt it, and Council did adopt it, and I think it was December of 2020 or 2019. I'm getting old, can't remember. But the comprehensive strategy includes establishing a municipal fleet electrification plan, a community-wide electric vehicle master plan, outreach to schools and school districts about electrifying school buses, outreach to regional transportation districts to do more about light rail and things like bus rapid transit or just bus lines and electrifying those, ride share, things like Uber and Lyft, and reaching out to those groups as well. And then supporting the electric charging infrastructure in the city. So it's the fleet plan was the first kind of up as far as a deadline goes, and we were obligated to work on it in 2021. We tried to have a date of having it done, I think of January this year, but we had a lot going on. So we've been meeting with this employee group. The employee group invites members from all of the departments that use vehicles. And so far, what we've kind of outlined in this plan is we've established a vehicle inventory and an equipment inventory, which is kind of a different part of this, all combustion engines. So if you think of things like chainsaws and blowers, compressors, all of that, we have those two lists identified. They're a bit of a moving target. We lose vehicles, they get damaged, we sell them. New vehicles come online, same with equipment, right? So we're working with a little bit of a rudimentary Excel spreadsheet kind of tracking system. We hadn't done that before. But the second part of the fleet electrification plan is really to build a decision-making matrix. How are we going to decide when it's the right time to invest in a new electric vehicle? It's not necessarily a great thing if one person has control over this or even one department has control over this. We need to have an open, transparent process that includes the social cost of carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, and incorporates all of those costs that environmentally this group is interested in, and moves away from the traditional decision making of does it just make sense and how much gas is it going to use. So that's what this plan has in it. And let's see, I don't think I have a copy in front of me here, but some of the more, no, it's okay, I got it memorized. Some of the more recent changes, so it goes through this process. It goes through the concerns that the staff had. We as I mentioned earlier, we had a couple of field trips. We visited Lightning E-Motors. We've been desperately trying to get our hands on a Ford F-150 Lightning because we have two of them on order, and they're back ordered, but we still are anxious to try them out. We asked very nicely our neighboring police department from the city of Arvada to show us some of their Ford Interceptors, which are plug-in hybrids. They came by and gave us a demonstration, and the police department checked it out, liked it enough that we have two of those on order now.
Nice.
So that's new, and a great example of having folks see it in person, touch it, feel it. I think that they stopped short of letting them like do a donut in the parking lot for liability reasons, but they were sufficiently convinced to try it. So we've got two of those on order. And then we've got some near-term and long-term efforts. What's new in this plan is the near-term efforts are those 4 vehicles that are coming, 2 Ford F-150 Lightnings as soon as Ford will give us delivery of those, and then the 2 Interceptors. We also have up to about 5 fleet charging stations that we're getting pricing for right now and trying to find locations for.
So 5? 5,
up to 5. And these charging stations look different than the public charging stations that we have. They're usually going to be behind a fence, behind the city facilities, not for public consumption. They're a little bit more dumb than the other ones. We still want data out of these things, so we're not willing to sacrifice everything for cheap stations, but they don't have like the fee-for-service capability. They might be more easy to work on maintenance-wise. So we're looking at different models right now to purchase this year for those. And then more long-term plans that are in here are to, within the next 12 months, there's some new deadlines in this document. And we're going to give you 2 weeks to take a look at this full document and ask to come back. The longer term plans are within 12 months, there's a deadline in there to have the city complete an assessment of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure locations, identify the needs of those stations and the price for what it's going to take to build out, getting to 100%, which is the goal. 100% of the available vehicles and equipment should be electrified by 2030. It's fairly aggressive, but I like to remind folks it doesn't necessarily include snowplows right now or fire engines, because if the product doesn't exist, we're not penalized for that in the goal. It's also looking at newer sources of funding. The state has more funds available now for chargers, vehicles. There's a procurement contract in an organization called the Climate Mayors Alliance, of which we belong to. It's an annual opportunity to do a large purchase, a collective purchase. So it might get us some of these vehicles a little bit quicker than just doing a state contract directly. So that's another option for us. And then the big part about this is the decision-making matrix, and we kind of struggled with this because we wanted to see what other cities are doing, and honestly didn't want to start something from scratch if we didn't have to.
Procurement decisions?
Yes, procurement decisions. So, and Tanya, you have experience with this one. We've been meeting with Electrification Coalition, who produces a free Excel tool. It's a Microsoft product that's called the Drive tool. And it was pretty wonky at first. It was difficult to, and it produces a total cost of ownership, and then it matches the vehicles that you have with an equivalent, electric equivalent. And it's based on VIN numbers, so it's very specific.
Yeah, but be careful. We went through that, and sometimes the replacements make no sense for the type of use.
Yes.
So you do need to look at it
It's true.
line item by line item.
So we've come up against that, and so far what we've done in the appendices in this document, you'll see in very small print the vehicle inventory and then the equipment inventory. And what we're doing is putting the VIN numbers for the vehicles. We've taken out trailers that don't have motorized equipment. We've taken out even small motorized vehicles that will fit in the equipment category because they don't necessarily have a standard Class 4 through 8 DOT, Federal Highways Administration vehicle equivalent. They might have a electric golf cart equivalent or something like that, or chainsaw equivalent. So we're putting those in the equipment list. We ran the rest of the resulting VIN numbers through the process. We came up with some of the hardships that Tanya's talking about, which is we had some things that would have been like an SUV that was used in the police department had been assigned the equivalent of using the Ford Mustang, or a snowplow truck that got something that wasn't even close. So
Mustang's an SUV now.
True.
Yeah.
So some of them weren't appropriate, and we're working with Electrification Coalition right now to fine-tune some of that data. You can change it manually, but we're trying to see what's available now and kind of go through those a little bit more. We anticipate having that done in 2 to 3 weeks. We'd like to come back for your final comments and review at your July meeting. We have a specific date set with City Council, July 12th, that I'd like to keep.
Hold on, are we talking about
You have a
this
June meeting?
June meeting?
Sorry, June. What am I talking about? Yes, thank you. So June, since we're already in June, I'm getting mixed up because we revised this one.
So the June 24th or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Wednesday.
that Wednesday. Love to come back and get your feedback on this plan. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'd ask, take a look at the plan, let us know some comments. We'll give you the update, which is going to be based on like finalizing and refining that decision-making section. And we'll give you a final draft. We're going to give the internal folks a final crack at it as well. And then if both groups are good with some comments, we'll keep our July 12th date at City Council for a final review of the plan.
When is the final again? When does it go in front of council?
July 12th.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions from anybody? Should we go just around to give everybody a chance?
No questions, I have 2 weeks to read.
Yeah, I think I'm the same.
Remind me how many light-duty vehicles? Roughly?
It is figure.
So I don't have to read the tiny font.
I know, it's in a pie chart on like page 5 or 6.
Like 40 or it's like 100 and something, isn't it?
It's mostly our fleet is light duty trucks and SUVs. It's a lot. So I think we got under 100 if we took out the vehicles that can't be electrified at this time and that are not necessarily qualified. So we're under 100 that are kind of in this phased plan.
Okay, that are in the early qualification
Yeah,
stage,
right.
which would be all the SUVs and trucks and cars,
Yes.
which there are like 3 cars or something.
Yeah, not very
There's
many.
Okay.
Yeah, even our police department functions mostly on SUVs.
So light, I don't know what you call light duty vehicles. Hybrids could be light duty.
Light duties.
Mostly trucks.
Mostly trucks. It's like trucks and SUVs and cars.
Mhm.
So is it?
It means not
Is an
commercial
F-350 a
equipment,
light duty
like a
vehicle?
trash.
No.
No.
There's a chart in,
Okay.
yeah. So Tim's question has to do with, and it's a good one, it really has to do with the gross vehicle weight rating of different vehicles. Federal Highways Administration has 8 different classes. It's in the appendix back there. It's got a really nice picture graphic of different types of vehicles and their weight ratings. So that's kind of where we're classifying what's a medium duty and a heavy duty. So an F-350, which is going to be one of your big pickup trucks, I think is either a medium or a heavy.
Ah,
Is
So
that-
24.
Anyway, I'm excited. I think it's great. I'm looking forward to this going forward. And it's cool that you ordered some plug-in hybrid
Yeah.
for police vehicles. And I think I'm still eager to see the F-150. Lightnings when you get it. I did see a Rivian recently
Mhm.
in the NREL parking lot. Somebody
Yeah,
had the-
I've seen a couple of them.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the same one twice.
Yeah, I know
It might be the same one that's
Those are cool.
It's pretty nice that they're starting to come out.
Yeah. And
That's it.
I first go with you. Todd?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I'm good as well.
Teresa, two comments. How often will this master plan be revised?
well, it should be a living document. So
I would
What I put in
suggest
there
the
is-
first revision after maybe 2 years.
well,
Usually 4 or 5 years.
I'm suggesting 1.
I think the EV situation changes.
Every year.
Well,
Yeah.
and supply chain is going to be part of that dynamic change, right? So
Well, this is a master plan, and my second comment is maybe relevant here. The master plan usually lays out 4 to 5 years. And this has been difficult to finalize, and when I look through, there are still sections that look incomplete, but I also think it doesn't need to prescribe everything. It lays a foundation and a direction, and the direction could be reevaluate by X and define the new procurement policy form.
Mhm.
You know, and you don't need to finish this in here, and we don't need to all agree on it. It's just a recommendation from this master plan to finish it by month X. And with that, I would not recommend that the whole master plan gets reevaluated within a year, because that ties up a lot of resources, but that it is general enough to lay the direction for 2 years. I agree, right now it's so, you gain a lot of experience over the next 2 years, so that it may be warranted to do it in 2 years again.
Mhm.
But I would also write in here in the executive summary already what the objectives are for this very first effort and when it's going to be revisited and updated.
Mhm. Okay.
And then just quickly, the second thing is, I think it is important to define what you mean by the city. So this master plan is different from what I thought it would be when I first heard of it. I thought of the city always that we take a look at the city of Golden, like the full geographical and everybody living in the city of Golden, and figure out if we want to go by 2030 to 100%, or whatever our goal is. I don't know if that is exactly right, 100%. Anyway, how do we need to rethink the infrastructure within Golden for residents?
Mhm.
This, I think, focuses on the city as the city's operation, which is fine. Maybe that's the only thing that the board, the council adopted, actually, to focus on the city's business.
There's the next deadline is for the community plan, which is supposed to be a separate effort. And that community plan is to start in 2021.
Okay,
Undergo UV, right? It's
Yes.
one of 5 or 6 bullets
got
that were.
it. That may be,
Exactly.
and I haven't read it yet, and maybe this is written in here.
2023?
2021 is in the past.
sorry. I'm getting confused. It's coming up next.
2023, yeah.
All I'm saying is it may be good to define closer what this document is
Yes.
about and how it relates to the larger.
Absolutely.
I
And
think that's in there, or maybe it's in some
Municipal
sort of
fleet
today.
vehicles, that's what that means to me.
Yeah.
What's that?
It says municipal fleet vehicles.
I mean, the Go EV, I got through like the first 4 pages before coming here today, and the Go EV pledge is in here, the highlight on the city sustainability goals is in here.
But it would be worthwhile to mention that if there's a second.
People read the
There's a second
executive
phase,
summary
yeah.
and that needs, it just says the city seeks to reduce diesel. Anyway,
Noted.
it's a quick
Okay.
definition and boundary condition about what this is about and how it relates to the other efforts.
But it should be unique and different, shouldn't it?
What do you mean by that?
You're talking about residences and versus the actual city's
Yeah,
fleet.
it's a whole separate,
It's a separate
entirely
effort,
different.
which I get, and that's probably good, because we would never finish this
No.
thing if we now think about the city.
Right.
I just think it's just good to set the expectations from the get-go of that this is just city-owned vehicles.
Thank you.
public vehicles.
I think that's important because I use city with a capital C for
I always
like the
get confused
municipal,
when
but
we talk about
it
city and
is
city.
super confusing, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure that we change that throughout this. And just to clarify, there are 2 different goals. So the city's, the municipal one is very much more aggressive. It's 100% by 2030. The community goal follows the electrification goal of by 2050.
Yeah,
So it's
that's what
very
I
different.
remember, okay.
Do we have a way of, no, I mean, this is maybe just a curiosity thing. How many electric vehicles are residents in the city of Golden driving?
We do not know.
We have some data that I collect from the state. The state reports it based on area codes, so the fallibility of that data is that we get 80401, 80403, and
403 goes way up in
it's
there.
huge. Yeah, it's all the way up to Blackhawk and up to Genesee.
But
So
still, it may be good, if all of us just have right now
Sure.
1,000 in both of these zip codes,
yeah,
it gives us an idea of the
Let me
way
pull
upper
that.
mark that we may have.
I'll give you that report. Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't ever know that. If city is capitalized, is that different from city not capitalized?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in general, lower caps is the community, and upper caps has always been the city, and that's kind
The
of how.
government.
the government.
Oh, because if I say city of Boulder, I always
Right.
capitalize it.
Mhm.
Anyway, good, it's just I wasn't aware.
I think it's a good point, though, because it should be clear in the plan, and so we don't
Just
want it to
define
be.
it in the
So
get-go.
I'll keep using municipal.
You could say city operations too.
Mhm. Yeah, good.
So the feedback will be verbal feedback at the meeting, or would it be?
No, written.
We should be writing comments and sending those
Yeah,
ahead, or?
just send it to her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just email me
How
notes.
far ahead do you want it, so I can put it on my
2
calendar?
weeks, she said that already.
Just by the end of 2 weeks, yeah.
So in 2 weeks, you want written
Mhm.
feedback?
From today.
Because then she combines it so that we see an updated version at our meeting, and that goes out a week before, so it gives Teresa a
Okay.
week.
And this is the most recent, Teresa? This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're
I'll
going to send
email
it
to you.
electronically?
Mhm. Tomorrow.
Quick question, kind of thinking about that link to the community plan. Is there anything in here that's about outreach or demonstration, like telling the community that the city has bought all these new electric vehicles and in order to get more interest and people will be thinking?
Yes, we should rent that police racetrack for a day and have test drives with our electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, how about
We'll
the,
drive them in the cruise or something.
how about in front of Bill's
The electric
race car on
cars.
Saturday?
Yeah,
Mhm.
or park them at the
I like the electric car.
you know,
Yeah.
at the
Yeah, bring
farmer's
them.
market.
So it's,
We're pleased to do donuts.
Or an open house when you
Yeah.
get them.
Oh, this gets the juices flowing. You
Yeah.
gotta have you gotta have a paragraph.
Just might be a little paragraph on how you're going to
yes.
tell people about it.
I will put that in there. And we had talked about in the past is branding and badging these vehicles as very
Yeah.
obvious that they are electric or plug-in hybrids.
Yeah.
So we can be obnoxious about that. Make sure that there's enough visibility on those.
The Lightnings are full electric.
Yes. Yeah.
Does this talk about where the charging like stations are going to be located?
It says that within 12 months we should identify where those go. But what I can tell you is that the near-term effort, up to 5 of them, we've identified a couple up at the maintenance shops where most of the vehicles stay overnight, at the Public Works building over here, and at some of the satellite locations, maybe like Fire Station 4, the golf course, some of our other satellite facilities. And our goal internally is that as soon as we can get our hands on these 2 trucks is to get them driven by as many employees as possible. Why we put in there an annual revisit of this plan is because the performance of those vehicles is really going to determine a little bit of the outcome of what our next major numbers of purchases of trucks are going to be. If they perform well, they can tow, they can haul, and they still have a decent amount of range, then the price tag is right at $40,000, and we'll probably be able to order a significant number of those. But we have to kind of prove them out across the different departments. So,
Do you know what the charge time is for like an F-150 from 10% to 80%?
Level 2 or level 3?
Level 3.
It is in here, right?
Well,
There is a graphic on
Level
charging
3,
times.
probably
I don't think we'll have one.
less, like 40 minutes.
so some of the fun components of
Level
this
3.
is, should we get some fast chargers, DC fast chargers? Should we get at least one to try that out? Other pilot projects could be, do we need to try out an electric trash truck, and partner with our trash hauler to see if that's going on? There's a couple of new platforms that are coming out, sweepers of all things, like a street sweeper
that would be
is
awesome,
electrified
too.
now. There's 2 manufacturers that already make them, so
Garbage truck's great. Is that available?
before, when we signed our contract with Republic, I had this conversation with them that we would be interested probably during the term of our contract of trying something like that out. If we get the opportunity, we'll present it to you and look at costs, but,
You can't beat a vehicle that stops every 50 feet. That's definitely.
right.
They're too quiet though. I won't know when to run out with the trash.
You'll still hear the choo choo choo.
In Taiwan, the garbage truck plays a song just like the ice cream truck.
Oh.
Look at that up on the
Workers. They smell it and they dream of it. And they
Tell Republic we want a little happy song with the crash
ice cream
trucks.
songs were always a bit.
They are creepy.
We may have to pay extra for that.
Just a comment for trucks, natural gas, like biogas, what Longmont is doing is maybe a good alternative. I don't know how the economics change,
Yeah.
but we're still, there's again some discussion if we may want to get some of the biogas from wastewater.
So we did talk about that being a fossil fuel still. Is that right? The renewable natural gas, is that what you're talking about? Or
I'm talking about
capture?
natural gas from wastewater solids.
Yeah, okay.
What Longmont is doing it
Biogas.
now, and
Yeah.
we should look into that. If the economics are, I think the trucks are still,
It might be good to revisit it. When we looked at their system a couple of years ago, it's such an upfront cost for the infrastructure.
and I'm not,
And then
it needs to happen in a bigger context.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
My money's on batteries for garbage trucks because of regenerative, because they stop so much.
For trucks specifically?
For garbage trucks, snowplows can be the hardest
Anything.
Yes.
because they need a lot of push. So
At what
those will
time?
probably have to go hybrid natural gas or something.
Yeah, or at some point hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you should be
It
more
might stop
We haven't worked on
snowing.
snowplows yet.
It might stop snowing entirely before we can get hydrogen.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on this topic? So just, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. My last request might be just offline. If there's any NREL technical assistance programs that we might be able to leverage of trying to help us assess and evaluate, and maybe this is where the building contracting comes in too. We're going to have to do a system-wide assessment of our electrical capabilities and equipment that we already have versus what we need with the chargers. And sounds like kind of a big effort that We won't do in-house, but we'll,
You mean like the underlying electrical infrastructure for these charging stations?
Well, especially if you get to the heavy-duty ones.
yeah.
Yeah, then you
Okay.
need much bigger chargers and much more
And it's-
electric capacity.
It's no small effort because we have several, we did a great job. There's 8 buildings that are net zero in Golden because of the solar that we did through an energy services contract, and adding chargers to those areas is going to make them not net zero.
Sure. Right.
But it's even more complex because then we need to also know like panel capacity and upsizing wires and transformers even. And then we'll throw in there the Xcel Energy time of use rates and whether or not their EV charging program
Because
could
you want to charge at night.
Do
benefit.
city buildings pay the time of use rate?
I don't know.
Well,
I
commercial
guess
buildings usually pay an event charge and not
Yeah.
a per kilowatt hour.
we have a variety of meters on all of the rates.
Yeah.
So I think some of them we probably do, but a lot of them are commercial and not just secondary general or primary general.
But that's a good point that you may want to mention here, that for the charging, you may want to already put these boxes in that allow you, with your app, to say when should something be charged or not, so that you use smart technology to charge at low-cost hours. All right, any other comments or questions on this year? So then by the 15th, in 2 weeks, we send in truck changes or commenting our comments to you, Teresa, and you combine it for that last meeting on the 29th of June. Okay. Can I just ask, while we're talking, and we still have 5 minutes on this item to spare, who is not there because it's summertime? Who is not on June 29th in town?
June 29th?
Yeah.
I thought it was
You mean
the
the next meeting?
22nd.
It's 22nd.
Oh, is it 22nd?
Yeah.
Yep.
At least that's what I
That's
had.
it.
Oh, okay. Good. You're right. It is the 22nd. Anybody not in town? That actually includes me. I am not in town. There's a conference.
I am in town.
I am in town.
Me too. I'm here.
Everybody else is in town? Okay. Whoever is elected as the vice chair today?
You could also do it a week later. I don't know if other people
I
are available.
cannot do it.
Okay.
So it's a tit for tat.
Yeah. You lose one, you get one.
Okay, good. So 22nd is a meeting. Can I ask the same thing for July? Because I'm also gone on that day, which throws me out of the board.
July what?
I think so. July 27th.
27.
I am here.
I'm here.
Here, question mark.
Here, question mark, but everybody else, and we have nobody missing tonight, right?
Right.
Okay. Teresa, we gotta talk because those are 2 meetings that I miss. I know
Okay.
there are crucifying consequences.
It's okay. Well, we just won't pay you for those.
Yeah, right.
I bring a lot of chocolate in August. German chocolate.
German chocolate.
Especially imported.
Should we move it to,
Everything will be forgiven.
should we do July 20th?
I'm heading out on the 10th,
Oh, okay.
so that doesn't be.
When are you
that doesn't
back?
help me. Yeah, I may call in because I
think
cannot
we
even
can
call in
anymore.
anymore.
Right.
Good. Okay, we had a discussion. Next, let's go to the agenda. If you could scroll down.
There we go. She's got it.
I have it here too. Chair and vice chair elections.
Good segue.
Okay, so here's where we are with that. Usually, as Teresa said, we have at the end of the year or at the very beginning of a calendar year an election. This year we had it as well. Ken and, oh gosh, you were our vice chair.
I was vice chair last year.
Last year, yes. So Ken was chair. He sort of phased out mid-year because he went into CSAP retirement. And with a lot of turnover that we anticipated, with all of you coming on board, I opted to put myself up as chair position, in the chair position, to have some continuity. We at the time did not, well, I was co-chair, right? I became chair because Ken retired. We don't have a co-chair right now. We do need a co-chair, and I think we do the chair election
Vice
today.
chair or
as-
co-chair?
Vice chair, vice chair, co-chair, same thing for me, but yes, vice chair. So we do today an official chair and vice chair election?
I think you don't have to do the chair unless you personally would like to revisit it, because the board did make a motion that you're chair for this year. We didn't say it was for 6 months, right?
I don't know if we made a call either one way or another. Can I just ask, is anybody interested in the chair position for this year? Is everybody fine that I continue doing it? Okay, everybody says, bless her heart, thank you for doing that. And
There
that
are dual
doesn't,
meanings for both.
I think we probably all have some job for us to do first anyways, right?
and it doesn't mean if any of you get annoyed by me moderating or how I moderate, that doesn't mean that you cannot moderate a meeting. Just because that's just what I put out there. I don't know if that's right, but that's my offer. So you can always call me up and says, Tanya, give us a break. I want to moderate the meeting like you jumped in today. Thank you. I do need a co-chair. There's a lot going on. I'm a bottleneck often. Things like that. When I'm not here, we need to have at least 2 people who know at all times what is going on. And that also support all of you. In how you're supporting the board and checks in with you. And so I would like, that's why I said we should have a co-chair election, a vice chair election today. Should we start by, Teresa, is there anything you would like to add on the process? Or should we go around and hear who's interested, or if there are questions on what it involves with that?
Yeah, let me know if there's questions. I think I put in the email that we typically meet just to discuss the agenda or to follow up on a meeting. We can meet virtually. We have a standing Monday at 4 o'clock meeting, which the date and time can change, but we don't always meet every single week. It depends on the chair and how they want to run it. So in the vice chair position, it's mostly support. So if the chair is gone, then I would work with you and talk about what's coming up in the next meeting. We'd go over the agenda before we publish it, make sure everything's on there that you would like and that we need to have on there. And then once in a while we follow up with projects as well. But you could talk about if anybody's got interest first. I think in order to make it kind of open to everybody, consider all nominations that would be interested. And if somebody express interest in it, somebody else will have to nominate them. They can't, they shouldn't nominate themselves. So.
I personally would look to the more senior members of the groupers, and I thought
It's
you
just
were
me.
vice chair, and so is that the case?
I mean, I was vice chair last year. I'm perfectly willing to be vice chair, like in the meetings, but I can't attend the weekly at 4 because it's just too much. But like being a substitute for when you're not here, I'm perfectly fine to do that. And maybe one Monday a month, but I can't do that every week.
So Allison, are you going to punch me if I nominate you to be the vice chair?
Yes. I haven't even met you yet. So
We've narrowed it down.
yeah, well, Tanya's asked me this before. I just can't right now with work and little kids, and I can barely. I'm trying to make this work, so I really want to help, and my time will come, but it's not going to be right now.
So this is a 1-year kind of commitment,
Mm-hmm.
but does that mean between now, which is actually June 1st, to December
Yes.
of this year is what that actually means?
That does. Yep. We do calendar year kind of cycles.
It seems like you're interested. I know.
I'm not hugely interested. I don't have a job. I'm retired, and so I can make more or less Mondays at 4. This coming year is really going to be kind of brutal for me also, but I can make Mondays at 4 mostly, if that's like the bottom.
I can make it work as well.
And the time and date don't let that be a hindrance. Like,
Yeah.
and email works just as much as meetings does. We've had the gamut of chairs and vice chairs and how they would like to operate, so there is no constraint on that.
So if I can make a proposition, I think it is helpful to have in the first year, because several of you came in new.
And he's got experience.
You have already worked on the planning commission. There is going to be a lot of effort this year, still on the building side, where we're going to talk about that next, where we just completed the consultant effort with, the line of action here is new buildings and new building code, and there's a lot we still need to do. You bring a lot of experience with that. That would be very helpful. If you have the time.
I don't have the time. I didn't say that. I can make it work, though.
I think it is very helpful to have somebody attend the meetings outside of this meeting with Teresa. And we can find a time that works for you, hopefully without, invite your wife sometimes as well to stay in good standing.
I'd be happy to lead one of those meetings too, like Jill said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't feel like whoever is the vice chair now has to lead both those meetings. That's kind of a lot for a new person, so maybe Jill and I could lead those meetings.
Lead the meetings here, you mean?
Yeah, these meetings, the June, July, the ones you can't come to. Yeah, I'm happy to lead one of those meetings
Yeah, I
to
think,
support, yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah, same here.
In planning commission, they actually did that for a while and kind of abandoned it, but everybody took on this study session, for example. It was their role to run the study session. And it wasn't always the chair or the vice chair.
Totally punch me if I nominate for
Too far away.
Gosh, you're just looking for it.
No, I'm trying to avoid it.
I put it up boxing gloves.
Actively avoid it.
Could throw a mic maybe, but I'm okay with it.
I nominate Tom.
So it is not a given, but, oh yeah, please.
I'll second the nomination to Todd.
I wasn't sure if you're interested.
Oh, no, I'm
You're interested in second?
It is not always, it is not a must, but typically the vice chair moves into the chair position next year. So you have 6 months to think about that. I'll try to keep you
So does
interested.
everybody else in this room.
Everybody else. That's clear. Could also be, so the way how it worked for me, and I thought it was very good, when I came in, the first year I was just observing. Second year I became vice chair for Whitney, and so I learned a lot from her. And then when Whitney was retiring, I took over the vice chair, the chair position 3 years now ago or something like that, right, Teresa? And I felt pretty well prepared because that 1 year where you're in these meetings and you hear a lot of what's going on outside of this meeting, we try to bring as much as possible in here, but we can't discuss everything that happens. That gets you into the topics quite well. So that's why it's helpful to be in a co-chair position or a vice chair position as opposed to the chair position. All right. What's next, Teresa? An official election? or?
You need a second to the nomination, and then you need to have like a vote or consensus opinion. And
Roll call
right, yeah, sure.
or thumbs up?
Or consensus, yeah, that's fine. Thumbs up is good.
All right,
But-
I think we have a second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Great.
And should we have is anybody not in favor of Todd being vice chair? Okay, everybody in favor says aye. Aye. Okay, good. Congratulations.
Thanks, Todd.
So sorry. How are you here? And then, Todd, are you interested?
You're on deck.
Are you interested in the June or July meeting to chair one or both of these meetings?
Either that or.
I'm going to
We can
be available for both, so I'm fine with
Okay. And then I let you decide to draw on these lovely ladies to support. And what we've also sometimes done is that we split it up.
it. Did you hear that, Tim?
Certain aspects you do, and then others. I find it nice too.
You're currently Mondays at 4. Do you want to send me a calendar?
We'll talk about that.
So I can, but we can move it, yep.
Yeah, I'll find a time that works. Okay, good. Should we move on to 6B?
Yes.
Energy Code Stakeholder Group Update. Teresa, should we start? Do you want to start?
Sure. Let's see, I'll give you the 3-minute summary, or 2 minutes.
That is,
Because I'm looking for the community solar one, just,
Okay, coming up. Energy Code Stakeholder Group. And thanks, because Tanya and Todd have been attending those. We now have wrapped up 3 workshops. Sorry, it's really 4 workshops. And 3 of them with a citizen panel that had a lot of representation from different stakeholder groups, residential, affordable housing, contractors. We didn't get great participation from the commercial sector, but we had the meetings and went through new construction as a topic and looked at policy and code options, code alternatives. All of these code alternatives are off the shelf. They exist in a standard that has been produced by a nonprofit or a company that deals with building codes, but there's been kind of different versions of them. So what we're producing on Guiding Golden and have been kind of maintaining is outlining what those code options are. And the group looked at those and discussed their ability to get us towards net zero or get us towards electrification. And they did that in one meeting for new construction, and then they did that in another meeting for existing buildings. Our last meeting was last Thursday, and we talked about a 5-year roadmap, mostly for existing buildings, but to kind of look at what are other things that we need to do, other research that we don't yet know, other policy implications that we're going to have to still kind of build off of this effort. We're now moving into a phase where staff is meeting with the consultants weekly to refine the roadmap. So for the roadmap, we're going to send this out to the stakeholder group and ask for input back. And then also in parallel, we're going to be reaching out to more commercial entities because we did not have enough participation. And while we're at it, we're going to do some surveys to residents, tenants, and more low-income folks, just to make sure we have enough input. The stakeholder group was good, but not necessarily a minimum representative sample of the amount of feedback that we need for this. So while staff is doing that in June and July, we'll continue to work with the consultants on refining the roadmap, and we'll have a draft for you. I think what we've got planned for is August and September for review with this board and review with Planning Commission. That's leading up to some discussion between your 2 boards to see if you can come up with a unified recommendation and a proposal that then you would forward jointly to City Council by October 1. So we've got some placeholders already set in your calendar. I think I put them in there, but if not, we'll put them in now. Oh yeah, they're not in there. So we'll put those in on Planning Commission's calendar, on your calendar, and kind of give you enough time to review. Here's where we've been. Here's the input that you've gotten. What's the package you want to send to City Council? And it'll be some near-term actions of what City Council could adopt soon this year, and then maybe some other actions that we need to kind of look at coming up as well. So
you mentioned there are several options for the code. They're all off the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Does one clearly have more support than the others?
I think so.
couple of
Can
them.
you spoil it?
Do you want to talk about it at all? You can. These are all in development to be published on the Guiding Golden webpage. So all of the videos are uploaded, notes are uploaded, all of the reports coming out of each of the workshops, and so.
I think to give a little bit more background,
Mhm.
there was a joint committee between Planning Commission and CSAB that spent the better part of 18 months
Yeah,
kind of putting together a plan, and then Teresa made it known that there was money in for a consultant to actually take it to the community with our recommendations, but also options. And the final recommendation, there were 3 primary options, A, B, and C. And within those, there was an A+, and a B+, and a B++, because the consultants realized they kind of missed the mark on a few things, and they added more options. And this is a zero energy approach to new buildings is one of the primary recommendations, and highly supported by the community.
Natural gas allowed?
It'd be all electric as well. What were they?
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember all the details in D++.
so,
Could install solar.
Renewable,
solar
on-site renewable.
yep, it depends on which option. So I think, option A was net zero, but using the International Code Council appendices. Option B comes from New Buildings Institute
NBI, yeah.
and is less of a typical code, but more of a standard that we would kind of adopt, and that's the all-electric option for electrifying things. A third option came from the International Green Construction Code, but is problematic in implementation. And I think one thing to acknowledge that the partnership between the 2 boards did very well is came up with a set of guiding principles and really made sure that the options that are under consideration are kind of keeping in mind Golden's constraints.
A small municipality with limited bandwidth.
Mm-hmm. So they've really kind of tried to stick to what's possible here in Golden and look at.
Let's not recreate the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
But also leverage a performance-based approach, not a prescriptive. Teresa and I had a chat with the folks up in Boulder County specifically, and asked what lessons were learned, and they have 2 paths, prescriptive, performance. And in hindsight, they said, we wish we hadn't done the prescriptive because it's a lot more administrative time and work. Performance puts pretty much everything, the onus on the actual builder, the developer. It requires them to have a performance-based energy model created and verified.
So the timeline for now, I'm just looking at the time, and I know the other ones are important too. All of you are encouraged to go onto Guiding Golden and look at maybe at minimum the meeting minutes, unless you need some video time, and then they're all there. But the meeting minutes, looking through those quickly may be helpful to get up to date on what has been discussed. For new buildings, which there are not too many in Golden, maybe 60 every year. But it's a fundamental change, obviously, to go to a net zero for new construction. So there's a lot to consider. And then we had quite a discussion also on the considerations for existing buildings and trigger levels. And so those recommendations will be less, here's the code you should adopt, but much more still on things we need to think through to get to a recommendation. And we have time with that. We knew that we needed more of a roadmap for that rather than here's, go ahead.
Sorry, of the 2, existing buildings is the whale. It's so much harder because yeah.
We all live it every day. Yeah.
And it's the first step, I think, is a recommendation we can take right now, and that is start the benchmarking, start the baseline, create an inventory of what we have, what their use is, and then from there it's a function of establishing carrots and sticks to actually start moving towards that 2050 goal of zero energy for existing buildings.
Yeah. So I think we're anticipating in about a month a final report that will put us into
Mhm.
July. Once we have that, I think we're going to distribute it immediately, right, for
It's
the
due,
boards and
due July 15th, so we'll
July
have it for your
15th,
July
yeah.
meeting.
And then we discuss it in the August meeting, you think? Or in the July meeting, we could give an overview as an update, maybe an orientation of what's in there. And then
Yeah.
in the August, we should put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I think we can easily give you a draft at the July meeting.
Okay, good.
So,
Any immediate questions to that? Everybody knows how to get on Guiding Golden? You're all on there? Okay, good. Should we move on, because there's still 2 other topics?
Jill is keen to talk about committees, so.
I would
I think
actually,
Tim is too.
I want to make this greenhouse gas emission inventory report quickly, and then I actually would like to spend the time. I had the plan to meet with you, and maybe we can figure out tonight a time.
Okay.
We have the greenhouse gas emission inventory report.
yeah,
This is now finalized, right?
This one is,
This is
yeah.
finalized.
right.
I think it would be good to sit together with you, see what we can extract to actually inform in a one-pager, and draw some conclusions in terms of policy, and what are the action items for our board coming out of this. And I thought you would be uniquely suited to look through that and take that on as your second or so data analysis that you so
Yeah.
kindly did for us a while back. So I don't know if there's anything else to that,
I want to
but
reconcile.
otherwise, this is,
I want to reconcile it with the Excel data we were looking at too.
yeah.
And then figure out how we can do an update in the Informer.
Yeah,
I think we were talking about this fall potentially, or whenever we can get it
Whatever
out.
the time is, but it would be good
Yeah.
now that we have it to also, and maybe we can put that onto the agenda for next
Mhm.
time, if that works for your time, even though I will miss it, but we could coordinate.
Okay.
But that may be good to get an analysis from her.
yeah, and we should tell, Allison's uniquely qualified to work on this because she worked on our first inventory we ever had in, in a different capacity.
Many years ago.
So thank you, we'll look
Yeah.
forward to your review of it. For now, we're going to put it up on the website as the final, but I'll put a note to that we need to work on a report for the Informer.
Just something the community can consume that's this, and I
Yeah.
think just update on our goals. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and a little bit
Some-
comparison to the first one.
Yeah,
on
like a
how
half
it
page
is.
or something digestible.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Good, should we use roughly 8 minutes for
Greenhouse gas, or
some of that?
community solar. Community solar is the next thing to be finished. So we have a revision out of the city attorney's office to put it in the correct format. I have stripped out some of the things for efficiency's sake. I think originally we talked about having an RFP that would look at a partner to do more solar development on city properties. We are now at a point where we just need the solar garden component of this back. If I can, it is at the top of the list, and what it's written for is to send out this Friday, have a due date of July 5th.
So you're going to publish the RFP on Friday?
Yes, but I still need to talk to Jill about things.
And
so-
probably Tim too.
And Tim, yeah. So I'll send you the revision tomorrow, and it's shorter than the last ones,
This is
but in
important.
some
Do you
respects.
quickly want to coordinate
we'll
when
make
you're
it
actually
simpler.
going to talk?
Yeah, are we gonna talk or am I reading something?
Read an email. Read an email.
Okay.
I can read an email anytime.
Do you want to coordinate by email, or
Yep.
is it important
Or
enough?
do you want to
'cause
have a conversation with Tim and
I think you should
later
have a
this week? After you s-
conversation
Yeah, you
early
can send
enough.
us something and then we can read it and then have a short, if that's helpful to you, Teresa.
Yeah, I want to be respectful of your work time. So, if it's easiest to just have comments back by email and do that way. Otherwise, we can meet
Tim and
too.
Joe, would you be available for a half-an-hour call this week?
Yeah, we could be
This
there.
weekend.
Talk to me about it.
Okay.
This week has only 2 days left.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right, it's Wednesday.
Coming out in 2 days?
Well, it could be ready.
That's
and-
why I want to have
yeah.
this.
Oh, okay.
So wait, so
No,
you're trying to
because
send
we
it
need to get
to,
this
you're trying to
thing out.
publish it Monday or Friday? Wait, I'm sorry, missed.
Monday is fine too. So having it due on July 5th gives us a month to have it,
Monday,
consultants
better
turn it
to
around,
come out with
so.
an RFP than
Yeah.
Friday.
Yeah.
Yep.
So maybe you want to have Friday morning?
So if you send it to us tomorrow.
I'm really trying to be pushy here.
Yeah. But yeah, I could talk on Friday.
I could talk on Friday morning, so why don't you send
Okay.
it tomorrow?
Right,
If everything is perfect, then we cancel the Friday morning
Right.
meeting,
Okay.
otherwise let's put it on the books. What time Friday morning?
Is it gonna be, it's gonna be on BidNet? I'm asking for a friend.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right now I have any time. There was something else I'm waiting for
Is this
me
something
on
we're gonna
Friday.
do here in person?
I think no. We
Well,
should
that's
virtual or something.
usually-
Come
Yeah,
virtual,
virtual.
So
Yeah.
then I don't care, anytime Friday mornings.
I believe I have a 9 a.m. that is trying to be scheduled. So other times besides 9 to 10.
10?
10 works.
I have something in the morning, but I can't remember. I didn't bring my work calendar with me. So.
I have your work calendar.
Oh, Tim, why don't you tell me when my calendar is busy on Friday?
Just a second. This is an unexpected advantage, isn't it?
I still have a separate work phone.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, which I didn't bring with me.
I see. I just came here for work.
They're
For avalanche games? Is that noise for avalanche games?
No.
Oh.
It's,
Were there
I
any,
haven't
when
figured
they
out.
were keeping this out,
I think
were
it's-
there any
Yes. Well, we just look at them all, yeah.
substantial changes from the attorney?
No.
And
No.
What, we waited 4 months for them to tell you, here's how we formatted, keep these borders?
Who's the real son?
Teresa, we gotta streamline this.
Yeah.
I'm about to go make a public comment
Yeah.
to council that somehow there needs to be directive on how, is that appropriate? We cannot wait
I
that
think-
long
I mean,
for a formality.
I'm addressing it with the city manager, and
Okay, so you got it covered? Because
Yeah.
we're waiting for other things for them as well, and if all they tell us, you didn't keep the 1-inch border,
right.
That'll be $300 an hour, please. That took us an hour.
yeah, and you waited 4 months. Longer.
Well, Tim looks at my calendar. We can do that after the meeting, so we can set a time after.
That sounds good.
If you want to finish up whatever we need.
I'll send you the new draft and then a request for 10 a.m. on Friday, and then we can decide if that works.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Great.
very good. Is there anything, so on Monday, cool, we have the call on Monday afternoon, and hopefully by then it's published.
Mhm.
That's great. Do you expect already a heads up for them on any issues where you want feedback from both of them? I'm just trying to work towards that Monday and not have anything unexpected come up.
I don't think so. We're asking for proposals. It's not in a final contract, so we don't have to publish all of our standard, like we promised to hold you to this exact thing when we find a partner.
Is it for both sites still?
No, the other site, I think we can do internally as, well,
Is it Rooney Road as well as the?
oh, no.
So that's out too.
Yeah, politically, we're not ready for Rooney.
Okay.
And the other one is pretty small, the little detention
The
pond.
little site. Okay.
Yeah, we could probably handle that separately, but it's just for the.
So
main
it's
big
just for the one. Okay. So you've narrowed it down to.
one. Right.
Okay.
So I think there are only 2 items left, agenda items for the June meeting, and I actually would like to find a time, because I was not able to schedule it for all the new ones, to meet up and talk about stuff from this board. Okay, so maybe we could do that after, if you could just hang out for a minute or two and we find actually a date and put it on. Okay. Agenda items for the June 22nd meeting. I have the vehicle master plan. Is that for that,
That's the.
right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I thought
And-
that was July meeting.
Yeah, that's this meeting.
Oh, it's
We
the
have 2
June
weeks to
meeting.
comment.
Oh,
We'll
right.
talk
It's the
about it
July
a week
meeting.
later.
Okay. Yep.
Mhm.
July
Okay, so
council.
that one
It's
is.
because it's July council meeting. Yep, you're right.
That's confirmed.
Yep.
Mhm.
Allison, do you think you have time over the next month so that we could put the greenhouse gas lessons learned, actions to be taken
Sure.
on the June meeting?
I'm gonna be in Florida for 2 weeks, so.
We have a lot of time on the beach. Is that how it works?
Because nothing's better.
It's going to be
Gas station.
really hot there.
It's natural to think about greenhouse
Think
gases
outside.
when it's smoldering on the beach.
Yes. And you're thinking this is separate from the other kind of sustainability metrics stuff, or is that
I think it's
together? Part of it.
I think it's one of the metric, the greenhouse gases. That's why it would be
Okay.
nice if you know, hopefully by Christmas we work through all the
Yeah.
goal areas.
Yes. Okay.
Just setting an arbitrary deadline.
I like it.
Teresa, what else comes to mind for the June
I
meeting?
have a quick announcement about about Jeffco Public Schools. So I don't know if everyone's aware, Mitchell and Golden High School are doing Renew Our Schools this coming fall. Does everyone know what that is? Where they do an energy challenge and they install e-gauge meters. And I don't know, I just thought that was really cool. I met with Kimber Priest. She's the sustainability coordinator. So I just wanted this group, I feel like I'm still trying to push the kind of school sustainability thing and how do we plug in and support what they're doing and all of that. So it might be cool to have the students present at some point, probably later this year, but just a quick
I love that
announcement.
you're saying that, and I think we should, I'm not at that meeting, but I would like to talk with you because Golden High School has some very active students.
Yeah,
They asked for support on Earth Day, but it came so late in the game that we couldn't do it. But to stay in contact with them and support them on something would be very worthwhile.
and she's doing her strategic plan right now, and I just think she could use help. So I'm just wondering how we can, so Teresa, I sent you an email introducing you. We can, but the board can help with that. I'm just wondering how.
Do we still have the scholarships in our budget for this year?
I think so.
It's sort of a rolling, it
It's a
doesn't
rolling-
help that it's rolling, because that means we never talk about it.
It's
We're always ready, but nothing ever happens.
it's a small amount, so there's likely to have room for at least one or two. So if you wanted to do one thing with the school about that, that's probably fine.
Or
Let's
she
put
could
that-
come in and present. I mean, there's got to be something
Yeah, we
there.
can do that.
Yeah, okay.
I'd love to hear about that.
Is that going to happen, you think that
No,
should
no.
be something for June or when?
No, like later
Got it.
in the
Good,
fall or
okay.
something, yeah.
Do you want to keep the greenhouse gas thing on the June agenda, though?
Yes,
Okay.
I can review that. Let's talk about what you want me to look at.
So then your June agenda is full.
What else do we have? I have only 2 topics so far.
Oh, you've got the citywide ordinance, the policy alternatives for the recycling and the compost.
What
that we
needs to happen for the single-use plastic?
That is the attorney legal review and the next steps for a follow-up recommendation to city council.
We still need to know the border size of the document.
I was processing for a second.
Yeah, for a second, I'm like,
All this
what
stuff.
borders are we talking about? Oh, okay.
This is all on record. I shouldn't say that. Oh, I hope they're listening. Okay.
So low.
What happened with Forest Tech? Did they incorporate our comments, our edits?
They did, and
Okay.
I don't think I can, so we're recording the meeting, it's public. I probably can't announce anything yet.
Okay.
But it's definitely moving forward. and-
City council hasn't fully vetted it.
No, this is different. So I think what we can say is that Allison introduced us to a project that Coors Tech has in place that might be offer a partnership to
Different.
install
That
more.
wasn't what I was
electric-
talking about,
Oh.
but that is something else I know
That's
we were
also
talking
very
about.
interesting.
Yeah.
How do we get her to talk?
So
You're
this
talking about the
update,
STEP grants?
yes,
Okay.
it's a SEP grant and 8 to 10 new public charging stations that they might fund. So not finalized.
Level 2?
Yes, just like our other
It may
ones.
be,
But the Course Tech, really quick, did they accept our edits? Like, is that?
Yes.
No, they shifted the responsibility of allowing off-site renewables to planning commission instead of the planning manager.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking about?
and council
Sort of,
has already
yeah.
decided on this all?
I don't know if it's been through
Been
council,
approved?
yeah.
All right. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted
Still
to.
something outstanding with that.
Planning commission will
Yep.
accept that they will.
Well, they didn't feel it was proper that the city planning department director would hold the reins, a single person.
Oh, I remember that
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
I watched the recording, there was something about the city.
That was what was in the original plan. It
No,
was
we
a
said that
single
should-
person would
They
make
did
the
take
decision, and the planning commission
Okay.
didn't think that was a good idea.
So one of the things to put on your agendas for later this fall is coming out of this energy code stakeholder group, and it's this discussion of what does offsite solar generation mean to us? Do we want to allow it? What percentage is okay? And that's another good, probably focused conversation.
We should
to
put
We
have.
How does it link to the
should
solar
have a
garden?
conversation, but I don't think it has to be a long one.
Mhm.
And the reason is that there's a variance process. And if there's a hardship that requires offsite renewable, there's already a process in place for that.
I think we should put on the July meeting, these various points that we discussed are worth, that we still need to figure out, and start having a discussion, because there's more to it than just saying there's a variance, Todd. And we don't have time tonight to go through this, but I know that historically in the board, there was a strong discussion of offsetting, using, regs, just all of that stuff. I think there is some discussion. So we can tackle that for the July
Or August.
meeting. Teresa, with these 3 items, are we missing anything that's relevant because something is moving in front of council?
There was one more thing. Sometimes we get requests from individual city councilors. I added another document to this meeting, the email. And
I saw that, and it was utterly confusing to me.
It's a little confusing, so we don't have to talk about it tonight. I think every once in a while, council calls upon this board to evaluate membership in an organization that might have some good climate goals and whether or not we should align with them as a city. And this is an organization that now I even forget what
Is it the standard?
standard. Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
So I sent you the summary on it a little bit,
Do
but
you need something from us tonight on this?
I don't think it's timely enough for tonight. If you want to act on it in the next one, there is no urgency about
Did
this.
everybody read? Is there somebody who did not read it?
I haven't read it.
It looked weird to me.
Okay. What was your
Strange
question?
punctuation, that's our problem.
I thought they were presenting tonight, so for some reason, I'm
Okay.
still kind of like new, but I knew it was like a diversity NGO.
Okay, so just quick feedback,
There were
because I'm not
formerly
here at the next
4
meeting.
ethics.
Yeah.
I read it without any context, and even after 3 pages, it was a lot of words, but I could not figure out what the tangible thing is that they are doing or want us to do.
Mhm.
So it was too philosophical.
Yeah.
Then maybe,
How do we know when they're going to present, like someone's presenting, or?
And we're not getting solicited by the group. This was a city councilor saying, hey, can you give us your opinion on, do you think we should join this group or not? So in that case, what we would normally do is maybe at one of the upcoming meetings, set some time to discuss, and after you all have had time to review what that group, today is too early, it's too soon. And, to take a look at it and say, does this align with golden values? And if it does, or if it doesn't, send a recommendation to city council that says, yes, we think we should join, or no, we don't think you should consider this
I
one.
haven't even seen like what, maybe that helps, like to go to their webpage, what is joining?
They got this safe cities thing at the end, is that what they're talking about?
I
Yeah.
think here's how I understand Samantha's question, and I think the following would be helpful. When you send the packages out, sometimes there are appendices that are for us without a context.
Right.
If on the meeting minutes, maybe you could just have attachments, and then it's just as simple as Stand Earth, got this from counselor with request, does board think we should join? Usually to your question, if we have a presentation, it is clearly with a speaker marked on the agenda.
Yep.
Okay.
If it's not on there, they are not on the agenda to speak, unless they have a public comment.
I'm curious, Teresa, what other organizations or groups we're supporting and how, and like, I think that would help if this fits in.
Does this augment something that we're?
Yeah.
So we have a summary of that in our strategic plan,
I'll
It's in
send
the
it out.
packet, right?
I'll send it out.
It's in
Yep.
and we could also discuss it in our meeting. No, you're already a while here, but there's a good discussion, I'm not saying.
In the onboarding, no, in the plan that comes with the
The
onboarding
strategic
stuff.
plan that we have for
Yeah.
2022, Teresa summarized all the different
Okay,
groups
okay.
that we are right now part of and supporting.
Okay, I'll look at
That's
that
a
again.
good source.
Okay.
Great.
Good. Anything else? Any other updates? How was the reward session? The award session that we all missed?
Oh, that was
It's been
good.
out 2 months ago.
I had 2 award seasons this year. So ours was great, and everybody came except for the company. Oh, who was it? Trout Unlimited was there. Spinster Sisters was there. Who?
Jim Dale was the one.
Jim Dale, that's right. He was out of town. But I have a great picture of him because we presented it to him at his house on his front porch
Oh.
and got a picture of him. He was very, very
You should have
grateful.
called me up. I just lived down the street.
Oh, that's right. So we got pictures. Marissa's been putting them online, and they were very appreciative. It was a good session. So
By the way, the meeting is officially now adjourned.
Yeah.
This is just-